Chapter 607. The experts on the mountain peak were shocked. They didn't expect Yi Xian to be injured in one move. Talisman and martial arts dual cultivator. That kid is also a martial cultivator. What a strong spiritual soul. After affecting Yi Xian's soul, he injured him severely. Yi Xian lost because he underestimated his opponent, but he didn't lose unjustly. That Du Xiaofu's spiritual soul power is extraordinarily strong. What kind of eyesight did the experts on the mountain have? Naturally, nothing in the square could escape their eyes. Du Xiaofu was not only a spiritual talisman master, but also a martial cultivator. He could affect Yi Xian with his spiritual soul and injure him severely. That kid is very strong, many experts exclaimed. To be able to defeat Yi Xian in one move, his strength was terrifying. The most shocking thing was that Du Xiaofu was only 17 or 18 years old. His talent was shocking. Elder Kong's expression was ugly. He looked at the square from afar, and his eyes were about to pop out. His disciple, Yi Xian, who had just entered the martial king realm, was defeated in one move. Elder Kong couldn't accept this. Pucci, Yi Xian fell to the ground. His mouth was red with blood. He struggled to get up but couldn't. His eyes were filled with fear. He was a completely different person from his previous high-spirited self. At this moment, Yi Xian realized that this was the opposite of what he had imagined. He became the terrified person. He didn't believe that his opponent could defeat him in one move. It was like a dream. However, the truth was right in front of him. He could not believe it. Du Xiaofu is not only a spiritual talisman master, but also a martial cultivator. What a powerful strength, so valiant! Among the inner sect disciples, many extraordinary young men and women sighed. You lost. On the square. Du Xiaofu looked at Yi Xian, who couldn't stand up. Then he left. His mind was filled with the image of the bright saint sword manual. He wanted to go back and comprehend it immediately. Whoosh! The purple-robed figure flew into the sky and disappeared in front of everyone's shocked gazes. Everyone in the square was surprised to see a fierce battle today. Who knew that it would end in one move? There wasn't even any excitement. However, no one regretted it. Being able to see someone who defeated Yi Xian in one move was much more satisfying than a fierce battle. Ha ha ha, my pills, my Dao weapons. Quick, take them out. On the mountain peak far away from the Sky Martial Square, Elder Gu Qingyang smiled. Elder Gu Qingyang was. Elder. Gu Qingyang, Elder. Elder Qingyang. Elder Qingyang. Elder Qingyang. Elder Qingyang. Congratulations. The Qingyang experts sighed and looked at Elder Kong helplessly. They could only blame themselves for underestimating Elder Kong's disciple. They knew Elder Gu Qingyang's temper very well. You can owe anyone but Elder Gu Qingyang. Otherwise, you won't have a peaceful life in the Manchu. There was nothing that Elder Gu Qingyang couldn't do. Even the sect lord was afraid of him. Here, one by one, the experts handed over their medicinal pills and Dao artifacts to Elder Gu Qingyang. Multicolored light filled the air, and energy rippled. Elder Gu Qingyang laughed heartily, his eyes narrowed. Dozens of king-grade medicinal pills and no less than a dozen Taoist tools were all put into Elder Gu Qingyang's Qinkuan bag, making everyone's eyes red with envy. At this point, they couldn't help but suspect that Elder Gu Qingyang had set a trap for them to place their bets. Du Xiaofu defeated Yi Xian in one move. As his master, Elder Gu Qingyang must know the strength of his disciple. Thinking of this, everyone felt their hearts ache. However, it was too late for regrets. They watched Elder Gu Qingyang put away the Dao weapons and pills into his Qinkuan bag. Fortunately, I didn't place any bets. Yun Mingze, Husankuan, and the other elders looked at each other. They were secretly happy that they didn't place any bets. They couldn't help but be envious of Elder Gu Qingyang Yunming's Dao weapons and king-grade pills. For Husankuan and the other elders, The most shocking thing was that Du Xiaofu had defeated Yi Xian in one move. His strength had completely exceeded their expectations. Hurry up and hand it over. You're betting 10 king grade pills, not 8. Don't even think about taking advantage of me. And you even bet a low-grade Dao artifact. I remember that. Elder Gu Qingyan Yun Mingzi shouted. Some people wanted to save a few pills and Dao weapons, but they couldn't escape Elder Gu's eyes. Gulp! Yuanli Yunmingzi couldn't help but swallow his saliva when he saw his master accept so many pills and Dao weapons. Then his face was full of smiles. However, he wasn't as smug as Elder Gu Qingyan Yunmingzi. Elder Kong, it's your turn. Elder Gu Qingyan Yunmingzi, who had earned a lot, finally arrived in front of the gloomy Elder Kong with a smile. Elder Kong looked at Elder Gu Qingyan Yunmingzi helplessly. He could only take out a middle-grade Dao weapon and 2 king-grade, mysterious pills with a pained expression. Then, he handed them to Elder Gu Qingyan Yunmingzi. He finally understood why Elder Gu Qingyan Yunmingzi was so easy to talk to that day. It turned out that he had been digging a hole for him to jump into. Kong Zhonglei. After accepting the middle-grade Dao weapon and 2 king-grade mysterious pills from Elder Kong, Elder Gu Qingyan Yunmingzi's expression changed slightly. He directly called Elder Kong's name and his tone became heavier. He looked straight at Elder Kong and said, My new disciple is still young. According to seniority, it's enough to call you Elder Brother. Let's forget about this matter this time. But in the future, you must warn the disciples in the sect. If anyone dares to act recklessly and something happens, don't you think so? Hearing Elder Gu Qingyan Yunmingzi's words, the expressions of the experts in the surroundings changed slightly. The meaning behind Elder Gu Qingyan Yunmingzi's words was something that all of them had lived for so many years. How could they not understand? Elder Gu Qingyang's words were not only for Elder Kong, but also for everyone else. He wanted everyone to keep an eye on their own disciples. Whoever dared to provoke his disciple would have to bear the consequences if they were injured or crippled. If they dared to interfere, then don't blame him for being impolite. Elder Kong looked at Elder Gu Qingyan Yunmingzi, and his heart trembled slightly. Then he had no choice but to nod his head. At this moment, Elder Kong couldn't help but curse Sheng Zhizhou and Yu Tiantian 800 times in his heart. Not only did they cause him to lose a middle-grade Dao weapon and 2 king-grade mysterious pills, but they also caused him to offend Elder Gu Qingyan Yunmingzi. One had to know that in the entire Manchu, everyone knew that Elder Gu Qingyan Yunmingzi was the most protective of his disciples. The battle on the Tianwu Square had ended. Originally, everyone thought that it would be a fierce battle, but in the end, it was a shocking battle that ended with a single move. Amidst the astonished discussions, the figures on the Tianwu Square gradually dispersed. Then, there were many figures fighting fiercely on the square. The noise was endless. There weren't many rules on the Tianwu Square to begin with. Any conflict between the disciples of the Ancient Heaven sect would be resolved on the Tianwu Square. The Manchu was also happy to do so. As long as no lives were lost, they would turn a blind eye. Du Xiaofu returned to the mountain near the Tianmu Peak where he had settled down. After setting up a forbidden seal and a glyph array, he returned to his room. This is the Ancient Heaven sect. It should be very safe. After sitting down cross-legged, Du Xiaofu softly muttered to himself, If this wasn't a safe place in the Ancient Heaven sect, one of the 9 great factions of the Central Plains, then there was probably no safe place in the entire Central Plains. After a moment of hesitation, Du Xiaofu's mind moved slightly. At this moment, there were 2 small star-like balls of light in his Naiwen palace. One of them slightly trembled as it rotated. In an instant, a strange energy spread out, releasing a dazzling light in his Naiwen palace, illuminating the entire place. Hula! Then a round ball of light flew out from between Du Xiaofu's eyebrows and appeared in Du Xiaofu's hand. The mysterious runes on the round ball of light flickered, spreading a multicolored light, and an ancient aura rippled out. Looking at the ball of light in his hand, Du Xiaofu narrowed his eyes. With a thought, an ancient aura spread out from the ball of light, enveloping his entire body like a halo. The light was dazzling, and the ancient aura rippled. In the next instant, Du Xiaofu's figure appeared in a misty space. Du Xiaofu was no stranger to this space. It was a place where time was accelerated in the ancient, desolate space. One day in the outside world was 10 days in here. Outside, Du Xiaofu didn't dare to casually take out the ancient, desolate space. If someone discovered the ancient, desolate space, the consequences would be unimaginable. But at this moment in the ancient heaven sect, Du Xiaofu's scruples were a lot less. Continue to comprehend. In the ancient, desolate space, Du Xiaofu continued to comprehend the Bright Saint Sword Manual. Using his hand as a sword, rays of sword light condensed in his fingers as he continued to comprehend the Bright Saint Sword Manual. Du Xiaofu was so passionate about the Bright Saint Sword Manual, not only because of the profoundness and vastness of the Bright Saint Sword Manual, but also because he felt that the sword moves on the Bright Saint Sword Manual were vaguely familiar to him. This kind of familiarity made Du Xiaofu want to continue to comprehend it, as if there was something waiting for him in the future. This feeling was extremely mysterious, and even Du Xiaofu couldn't describe it. He could only feel it, but there was no way to express it. Chapter 608. Whoosh, whoosh! Streaks of sword radiance shot out from Du Xiaofu's fingertips. They were shaped like sword radiance as they drew arcs in the blurry space. No, I'm still missing something. 2 hours later, Du Xiaofu stopped his hand seals and stood in the blurry space in a daze. No matter how Du Xiaofu comprehended the sword moves in the Bright Saint Sword Manual, he always felt that something was wrong. This feeling made Du Xiaofu feel that it was not the sword moves that had a problem. Instead, it was the ancestor of the ancient heaven sect who comprehended the sword moves that seemed to have a problem when he comprehended the extraordinary sword moves. Therefore, when Du Xiaofu was comprehending and practicing, he could faintly feel that something was missing. Whoosh! Far away from the mountain peak, a figure flew through the air and stopped near the mountain peak. This kid actually set up a seal formation. The person murmured softly. Then he looked at the mountain peak. After his gaze moved, he immediately disappeared. In the blurry space, Du Xiaofu was in a daze for a long time. In the end, Du Xiaofu was able to use the mysterious move to perfect an ordinary martial technique. Even after cultivating the lightning destruction finger and the divine light thunderstorm of the divine light court, he was able to greatly increase their power with the help of the mysterious move. However, he had not succeeded in cultivating the Bright Saint Sword Manual. Naturally, he could not perfect it. Before using the mysterious move to perfect a martial technique, he had to first succeed in cultivating the martial technique. This sword technique is special. There are 6 sword moves, but they can be derived from thousands of sword moves. This feeling is very familiar. Suddenly, Du Xiaofu's eyes lit up. He murmured softly, "I wonder if there will be any progress if I use the mysterious move to cultivate it." As his voice fell, Du Xiaofu formed a hand seal. Using his fingers as a sword, streaks of sword radiance shot out and drew arcs in front of him. However, at this moment, these arcs did not dissipate. Instead, they gathered together and formed a dense and mysterious rune in front of him. Swish, swish! Du Xiaofu performed the sword techniques according to the illuminating, sacred sword manual. The sword rays did not disperse, but condensed and arranged, forming mysterious runes. Whoosh, whoosh! After dusk, the sky darkened. Several figures appeared in the vicinity of the mountain peak, one after another. In the end, after discovering the talisman formation seal on the mountain peak, they resentfully looked away. At night, on Tianmu Peak, the moonlight shone brightly outside. However, in the small hall in the courtyard, multicolored light filled the air. Energy fluctuated as if a treasure was about to appear. Bastard, this mid-grade Dao artifact seems to be a little damaged. There's also this king, grade, Permethopil. It seems to be a semi-finished product. That bastard actually dared to trick me. In the hall, while Elder Guqingyang was inspecting the Dao tools and king-grade elixir pills, he was cursing nonstop. Elder Guqingyang realized that many of the Dao tools and elixir pills that were lost to him had some small flaws. However, this did not affect Elder Guqingyang's mood. Although some of the Dao tools and elixir pills had some flaws, it did not affect the quality of the items too much. He still gained a lot this time. Master, Yu Wanli hurriedly ran into a small hall and said to Elder Guqingyang, I went to find Junior Brother, but Junior Brother was probably in closed-door cultivation. The place where he lived was covered with talisman arrays and seals. So I didn't disturb him. This kid really can't stay idle. He went into seclusion. Elder Guqingyang raised his head slightly and was stunned. Then he lowered his head and continued, counting his Dao tools and elixir pills. He said, It's good that he went into seclusion for a few days. In the afternoon, the sect master looked for me and asked me to let that kid participate in the second round of competition. It's good to let those guys know that my disciple is not inferior to those outstanding people. However, those monsters are quite difficult to deal with this time, especially when that little monster is back. Master, Yu Wanli did not seem to be listening to Elder Guqingyang's words. He had a puzzled look on his face. Then he said to Elder Guqingyang, who was sitting upright and checking the Dao tools and elixir pills, I saw Yan Mingze, Husan Kuin, and the others appear nearby and then leave. What are Husan Kuin, Yan Mingze, and the others doing here? What? Elder Guqingyang, who was counting the Dao tools and elixir pills, suddenly changed his expression and jumped up. He glared at Yu Wanli and said, Quick, from now on, guard your junior brother. Don't let anyone near him, especially Yan Mingze, Husan Kuin, and the others, until your junior brother comes out of seclusion. Yes, master. Although Yu Wanli did not know what was wrong with his master, he did not dare to provoke him after seeing his master's expression. He immediately turned and left. This group of bastards still want to have any ideas? No way. Elder Guqingyang raised his eyes and seemed to have lost interest in the elixir pills and Dao tools. He hurriedly put them into his Qingkuan bag and left the courtyard that night. At night, the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. Night clouds moved across the sky, occasionally covering the moonlight and then quietly moving away. In a quiet and elegant courtyard, a black-haired, middle-aged man in green stood under the moonlight. He slightly raised his head and quietly looked at the bright moon in the sky. Under the moonlight, his thin figure appeared slender and sturdy. The middle-aged man wore a green robe and had black hair. He stood with his hands behind his back, and after a long time, a smile appeared on his face as he murmured curiously, a cultivator of both martial Dao and talisman Dao, defeating the mysterious martial emperor Yixian with a single move. Interesting. I would like to see how far a kid with an unknown background like you can go. Time slowly passed. In the ancient heaven sect, the news of the new disciple Du Xiaofu defeating Yixian of the bronze ranking in one move spread. This news immediately spread in the Manchu, shocking many disciples who did not go to the Tianwu Square that day. As the news spread in the Manchu, Du Xiaofu's identity also began to spread. It was said that Du Xiaofu was the one who took first place in the outer sect disciple test in the 8th district not long ago. He was also the mysterious kid who caused a commotion in the Manchu. He was the one who stole the limelight from Feng Xiangyu, the human king, and passed through all the tests in the 8th district as if he was unstoppable. It's said that Du Xiaofu has already arranged to participate in the second round of the competition. The second round of the competition will not be simple. Not long ago, all the inner sect disciples will have to participate. It will definitely be a fierce battle. Those outstanding talents and human kings will all show up. I wonder who will be able to last until the end of the second round. It won't be easy to last until the end. You have to know that none of the people on the bronze ranking are easy to deal with. They are all very terrifying. That's true. None of the people on the bronze ranking are easy to deal with. In the past, not many people were able to last until the end. There was a lot of discussion in the ancient heaven sect. A grand event was about to begin. Everyone was looking forward to it. At the peak of the mountain, the sun was setting, and the afterglow shone in the sky. In a separate courtyard, 3 men and 1 woman stood. The one in the front was a 22-year-old young man in a black robe. He had a handsome figure and an elegant temperament. His eyebrows were distinct, and his pure black eyes were as black as the endless abyss at the end of the universe. Does he really have the strength to defeat Yi Xian in one move? Behind the black-robed young man, there was a similarly extraordinary young man in a long robe. His eyes revealed a doubtful look. His temperament was outstanding, and his eyes revealed some pride. It is said that Du Xiaofu first used his spiritual soul power to affect Yi Xian and then directly injured him. Under such circumstances, coupled with Yi Xian's carelessness, he was naturally injured. However, I feel that if Yi Xian had been on guard from the beginning, he wouldn't have been defeated so easily by Du Xiaofu. The black-robed young man said softly, "Those pitch-black eyes seem to make people feel as if they were about to be sucked in if they looked at them for a while. However, that kid shouldn't be weak. He cultivates both martial Dao and talisman Dao, and his talisman Dao is at the initial 6-star level." A young man who was not very tall but was quite cold said, "Let's worry about the second round of the competition." The second round of the competition is about to begin. The people on the bronze ranking are not easy to deal with. If we want to stay until the end, we have to stick together. I guess they are in the other regions, discussing how to form a team at this moment. A woman said, "The people on the bronze ranking." The black-robed young man slightly raised his head, his pitch-black eyes faintly glowing. Chapter 609. Moonlit night, mountains, streams, waterfalls, flowing water. A 25 or 26-year-old man stood there quietly. Under the moonlight, his facial features were almost three-dimensional, handsome as if they were carved by a knife. His entire person emitted a kind of elegant and untainted air. The waterfall was flowing, and occasionally the spray would shoot out, but it did not stain his robe in the slightest. "Those little rookies are coming to challenge us. They want me to ask for your opinion on how to play with those little rookies." A figure appeared silently. It was a young man of about the same age. He had a white face, thick eyebrows, and a tall nose. He was extremely handsome. The young man raised his head and looked at the moon in the sky. A smile appeared on his handsome face. He said softly, "They are just a bunch of rookies. What's the point of discussing? When the time comes, just follow the rules. It's just a routine. I'll just treat it as giving some guidance to my juniors." Mountains stood tall and surrounded by mountains. On a huge mountain peak, surrounded by mountains, it was lush green. Clouds and mist lingered around it. The mountain stream flowed and was full of life. The room in the courtyard was ancient. A light sandalwood fragrance filled the air. It had the effect of calming one's mind. In the room, the handsome middle-aged man looked down at the message jade in his hand. Suddenly, he raised his head slightly and looked outside the door. He said, "Little Muhan, come in. Don't hide." I thought that I could hide my aura and use my grandmother's secret technique to escape from my father's prying eyes. I didn't expect it to be useless. A lovely voice sounded. It seemed to be a little disappointed. After which, an 18 or 19-year-old girl skipped into the room. She was wearing a pair of beautiful shoes that were embroidered with flower patterns and had soft fox fur sewn around them. 2 sparkling white bangles on her jade-like wrists collided with each other, emitting a pleasant sound that made her appear even more adorable. The middle-aged man raised his head and put down the jade slip in his hand. His long black hair was neatly combed into a bun, and a few strands of hair fell over his ears. He smiled and said to the lovely girl, "Only you can make your grandmother make an exception and let you practice the secret techniques and martial skills of your grandmother's family. Those secret techniques of your grandmother's family are naturally not a problem. However, your cultivation is still lacking. Among your peers, or even ordinary people, I'm afraid it's not very likely that they can detect your aura. I thought it was because Grandma's secret technique wasn't good enough. The cute girl smiled sweetly. Her smile could move one's soul. Then, she lay on the middle-aged man's back and gently held his arm. She said intimately, "Father, why aren't you resting? Why aren't you resting yet?" The middle-aged man turned his head slightly and said to the cute girl, "Tomorrow is the second round of the test. Are you really ready? I'll give you some news first. Not only are Su Chuyin and the rest not to be trifled with, those fellows on the bronze list will not let you off easily according to convention. They will not be easy to pass. The few fellows on the bronze board are indeed difficult to deal with." The cute lady's pretty face hardened slightly. However, she quickly recovered her smile as she looked at the middle-aged man and said, "However, it doesn't matter. With senior brother Emo Chin around, those few troublesome fellows should not make things too difficult for me. Don't even think about it." The middle-aged man immediately glared at his beloved daughter. He curled his lips and said, "I have already informed them that they cannot take special care of you. Otherwise, I will not let them off so easily." "Father, how can you do this? I am your biological daughter. How can you let others bully your biological daughter? Grandma has already said that if you dare to mistreat me, I will be sent back." When she heard this, the cute girl's eyes immediately lit up. She glared fiercely at the middle-aged man with her hands on her hips. Her pink and tender red lips were slightly pouted. Her angry appearance made her appear even more adorable. It is useless even if you have your grandma protecting you. Although the middle-aged man loved his daughter, he did not seem to have any intention of compromising this time. After shooting a glance at his beloved daughter, he slightly stood up. His skinny figure appeared slender and sturdy as he opened his mouth and said, "That's right this time. Help father keep an eye out for a person." The cute girl glared at the middle-aged man. After a while, as if she felt that there was no turning back, she pouted her small mouth and said, "Keep an eye on who?" "A little guy called Du Xiaofu," the middle-aged man said. Hearing this, the cute girl's eyes flickered. She looked at the middle-aged man and said, "Is he the disciple that martial uncle wants to take in?" "Yes, that little guy. He is a martial arts and talisman cultivator. A few days ago, he defeated Yi Xian of the mysterious martial king realm with one move. He seems to be about the same age as you. He might even be younger than you. You should keep an eye out for him." The middle-aged man said, "Is that so?" The cute girl seemed to be interested. She said, "If there is a chance, I will go and test his strength. Don't make trouble. We will talk about it when the time comes." The middle-aged man smiled and said, "In the misty space, in front of Du Xiaofu, rays of sword radiance condensed and did not disperse. They outlined a dense and mysterious talisman in front of him. They were mysterious and unfathomable. The talisman flickered as if it was changing at any time. In an instant, there were thousands of changes. Du Xiaofu could not replace the sword with his finger and condense the sword radiance without dispersing if he was not in the desolate ancient space. Coincidentally, he was in the desolate ancient space. Du Xiaofu could take the opportunity to comprehend it. At this moment, Du Xiaofu was sitting cross-legged. He raised his head slightly and looked at the mysterious talisman condensed by the sword radiance in front of him. He was immersed in comprehension. At this moment, if the people in the Stone City saw Du Xiaofu's current appearance, they would probably think that Du Xiaofu had become stupid again. After an unknown period of time, the mysterious talisman in front of Du Xiaofu began to crack. Then, like rays of sword radiance dissipating, the talisman dissipated one by one. In the end, they all disappeared in the desolate ancient space. Just as the mysterious talisman dissipated, Du Xiaofu's eyes began to shine. Buzz! In the next moment, azure gold light surged in Du Xiaofu's hand. Then, an azure gold long sword with flowing runes appeared in his hand. A domineering and fierce aura spread out and made a clanging sound. Boom! As soon as the sword appeared, the entire misty space trembled. Then, Du Xiaofu still seemed to be immersed in a sluggish state. Rays of sword radiance swept out from his hand. Suddenly, the sound of wind and thunder resounded. The sword radiance swept out, making clanging sounds unceasingly. Whoosh! The sword radiance swept out. Rays of sword radiance streaked across the mysterious and unfathomable arc of the vacuum. The azure gold brilliance shone brightly, almost drowning Du Xiaofu. At this moment, as the sword radiance swept out, Du Xiaofu clearly did not use a trace of profound qi. However, the sword radiance that swept out from the nimble sword body caused the space to tremble. Layers of sword radiance overlapped and bloomed. It seemed to be able to communicate with the energy of heaven and earth. Using the energy of heaven and earth, just the pure sword move contained a great amount of power. Just by relying on the sword move, it was able to release a great amount of power and communicate with the energy of heaven and earth. If there were experts present at this moment, they would be dumbfounded. What kind of sword skill was this to have such power? At this moment, if Elder Gu Qingyang saw this scene, he would be so shocked that his jaw would drop. If Elder Gu Qingyang was present, he would realize that the bright saint sword manual that he had cultivated for over 100 years was obviously different from the sword move that Du Xiaofu was using. And if he observed carefully, it seemed that the sword move that Du Xiaofu had comprehended and cultivated was closer to returning to one's original state. Of course, at this moment, it was impossible to accurately say that the sword move that Du Xiaofu was using was definitely stronger than Elder Gu Qingyang's sword move. It was like two students were looking at a drawing. One student copied the original drawing very well, but the other student was looking at the original drawing and had already started to draw his own style. Flower splitting brushing willow. Yang passed 3 stacks. Whirlwind scattering clouds. Violent sword gale. Furious sword cutting yang. Holy sword roar. From his mouth he murmured. Du Xiaofu's figure leaped and his sword moved. The sword radiance contained seal, turn, trip, lead, poke, entangle, and chop. The dazzling green and gold talisman patterns bloomed like the golden feathers of a golden-winged roc. Together with the power of the sword move, the aura became even more domineering and frightening. The sword moves were continuous and endlessly derived. The sword radiance was monstrous, and the light covered the entire space. Gradually, one could only see a long sword in the misty space. It was like a spiritual python, a flood dragon soaring into the sky, and a rock shaking the sky. The long sword moved. There was a hint of spirituality in the domineering aura. There was a hint of demonic charm in the ancient style. The sword moves were incomparably profound, communicating with the heavens and earth. After practicing the sword moves for an unknown period of time, Du Xiaofu's figure finally stopped. The sword radiance in his hand retracted, and the tyrant shadow was also retracted back into his body. Walala! In the surrounding misty space, the streaks of sword light slowly disappeared in the space. Chi-chi! As the sword radiance disappeared, a faint golden light spread out from Du Xiaofu's eyes. An ancient and domineering aura also swept out from his thin body, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Who? A long breath came out from his stomach. Du Xiaofu's resolute and determined face slowly revealed a faint smile. He muttered to himself, "I've finally comprehended the Bright Saint's sword manual." Chapter 610. Soon after, Du Xiaofu's smile turned into a doubtful one. He muttered, "But it seems like it's not enough. This sword technique shouldn't be like this." Du Xiaofu felt that the 6 sword moves in the Bright Sage sword manual still had a feeling that they were not fully expressed. To Du Xiaofu, this kind of feeling was like a mysterious move. The more he comprehended it, the more profound and vast he felt. Du Xiaofu felt that if he were to comprehend more in the future, he should be able to improve further on the sword techniques in the Bright Saint Sword Manual. However, this kind of understanding was not something he could achieve in a short period of time. After thinking for a while, Du Xiaofu packed up. He did not know how much time had passed outside, but he immediately left the ancient, desolate space. After keeping the ancient, desolate space into his mind's Niwen Palace, he opened the seal that he set up. The morning sun shone brightly, and the air on the mountain peak was fresh. Suddenly, Du Xiaofu's face turned serious. He looked in front of him and saw a figure flying towards him. "Little Junior, you finally came out." As Wanli's anxious voice sounded, his figure immediately landed beside Du Xiaofu. His expression was rather anxious, as though he had not been waiting for a long time. He said, "If you still did not come out, I would not have been able to resist the urge to barge in." Seeing Yu Wanli's anxious expression, Du Xiaofu was stunned. He asked, "Third Senior, what happened?" "You have been in seclusion for 4 days. Today is the day of the second round." Yu Wanli saw Du Xiaofu and heaved a sigh of relief. For days in seclusion? Only 40 days. When Du Xiaofu heard this, he was slightly stunned. 4 days in the outside world was only 40 days in the ancient, desolate space. Du Xiaofu originally thought that he would be in seclusion for a long time, but now that he thought about it, 40 days seemed to be quite long. He raised his head and asked Yu Wanli, "Third Senior Brother, what is the second round?" "You don't know?" Yu Wanli was a little puzzled. He turned to Du Xiaofu and said, "You were the champion of District 8 in the Manchu Outer Sect Disciple Test, so you have to participate in the second round. There are benefits to this. Follow me. I'll explain to you on the way." Whoosh, whoosh, Du Xiaofu nodded, and then the two figures flew into the sky. After a few flashes, they disappeared in the sky. Along the way, Du Xiaofu learned from his third senior brother, Yu Wanli, what the second round was. In the second round of the competition, those who had just become inner sect disciples would compete against each other for the second time. However, the second round of the competition wasn't simple. It was extremely complicated. First, they had to compete with the experts on the bronze roll for a type of energy copper talisman. It was said that the energy copper talisman was a necessary item to enter the bronze roll. The ancient heaven sect had 3 rolls: the gold roll, the silver roll, and the bronze roll. Under Du Xiaofu's questioning, he found out from third senior brother Yu Wanli that the disciples on the gold roll had become inner sect disciples 3 years ago. The disciples on the silver roll had become inner sect disciples in the second year. As for the disciples on the bronze roll, they had only become inner sect disciples last year. There were only 100 names on each of the 3 rankings, and it was similar to Tianwu Academy's martial ranking. Those who could enter the gold, silver, and bronze rolls were all powerful individuals. They were all absolute geniuses in the outside world. The ancient heaven sect had 3 special spaces: the gold ancient space, the silver ancient space, and the bronze ancient space. The 3 spaces corresponded to the 3 batches of disciples. Within each space, there were all sorts of martial techniques, talisman arrays, beast energy, and secret techniques. However, the martial techniques, talisman arrays, beast energy, and secret techniques in the silver ancient space were superior to the bronze ancient space, but inferior to the gold ancient space. If one wanted to enter the 3 spaces, they had to use the gold, silver, and bronze energy talismans. Otherwise, they would be expelled. In the second round of the competition, the disciples on the bronze roll would compete for the energy copper talismans. In this round of competition, the Manchu would give out 3 months' worth of energy copper talismans to each inner sect disciple who participated in the competition. However, the disciples on the bronze roll would have a legitimate reason to snatch their energy copper talismans. They only had to leave behind 10 days' worth of energy copper talismans. According to Yu Wanli, snatching energy copper talismans had always been a tradition in the ancient heaven sect. A few decades ago, when he had just become an inner sect disciple, he had also been snatched by a disciple on the bronze roll. However, As long as he could last 7 days, the disciples on the bronze roll would no longer be able to snatch energy copper talismans. After 7 days, the 128 people with the most remaining energy copper talismans would be able to continue participating in the competition and fight for the top 16. The top 16 winners would have a chance to enter the Ancient Heaven Sect's secret area to forge. The champion would even be able to obtain a high-grade Taoist weapon. Du Xiaofu's interest was piqued at the thought of obtaining such benefits. Early in the morning, in the Ancient Heaven Sect, the morning clouds rose and thousands of mountains woke up. In a vast expanse of green mountains, milky white clouds drifted along the mountainsides. Under the morning sun, the clouds reflected the mountain ranges, and the clouds poured down in torrents. Among the mountains, in front of a rather spacious valley, there were many outstanding young men and women standing quietly. Under the morning sun, each of them looked valiant and valiant. The number of young men and women was not small. There were about 800 of them and less than 1,000 of them. However, each of them had an extraordinary temperament. Regardless of whether it was their clothes or temperament, they were all outstanding. Any one of these young men and women could be considered absolute geniuses in the outside world. At this moment, there were many middle-aged men and old men standing in front of these young men and women. Each of them had an extremely powerful aura. Judging from the badges on their shoulders, they were the protectors and deacons of the Ancient Heaven Sect. Looking at the hundreds of young disciples in front of them, the protectors and deacons looked satisfied. These were the future of the Ancient Heaven Sect. This year's inner sect disciples were even more talented than the previous years. There were actually several human kings and quite a few geniuses. This was enough to make them feel satisfied. 1 valley, 2 churches, and all spiritual and martial arts. 3 sects and 3 factions shook the Central Plains. This sentence referred to the 9 great forces of the Central Plains, and the Ancient Heaven Sect was one of them. The reason why the Ancient Heaven Sect's name shook the Central Plains was because of the endless supply of new blood. The Ancient Heaven Sect continued to become more and more powerful, allowing the Ancient Heaven Sect to become more and more prosperous. Any disciple who walked out of the Ancient Heaven Sect was never a simple person. They were all peak existences among their peers. In front of the hundreds of extraordinary young disciples, the dozen or so young men and women standing at the front were even more outstanding. These dozen or so people standing in front of the extraordinary people made the hundreds of extraordinary peers behind them feel reverence. They didn't feel anything wrong. This was because they all knew that any one of these dozen or so people was absolutely outstanding among them. Strength was respect. It was that simple and could be applied everywhere. Fortunately, they haven't left yet. Otherwise, we would have missed it. In the distance, Yuanli looked at the figures standing in the valley and breathed a sigh of relief. He stopped in the air and said to Du Xiaofu, who was beside him, "Take out your badge and wear it on your chest." Hearing this, Du Xiaofu took out the Mancha badge and pinned it on his chest. The badge was only the size of a child's palm. It emitted a faint fluorescent light. Immediately, a red object appeared in Yuanli's hand. It was rectangular, the length of an adult's palm, and the width of 2 fingers. Some complicated talisman patterns were engraved on it. Qi! As the hand seal condensed, the red object directly entered Du Xiaofu's badge like a stream of light and disappeared. Du Xiaofu could clearly see that a total of 9 scarlet items had entered the badge on his chest and disappeared. After doing all this, Yuanli said to Du Xiaofu, "These are 9 copper energy talismans that Master has arranged for you. Each copper energy talisman can last you 10 days in the ancient bronze space. At that time, the people on the bronze list will rob you of your copper energy talismans. If you can't beat them, then obediently hand them over. Otherwise, you will suffer greatly. Just keep the last one. When there is only 1 copper energy talisman left in the badge, it will turn red. At that time, the people on the bronze list will not rob you. However, you will be at the bottom of the list. Du Xiaofu nodded. He roughly understood what Yuan Li said. Go. Wait for a while. When the time comes, enter the sealed space with them. Strive to obtain a good result and make Master proud, and also make me, your senior, proud. Seeing this, Yuan Li lightly smiled and said, Senior, I'll be going. Du Xiaofu nodded to his third senior. Then his figure flashed into the valley and quietly landed behind the hundreds of people. In front of the crowd, many protectors and deacons raised their heads slightly. When they saw Du Xiaofu quietly land in the crowd, some people's eyes secretly moved. However, they did not say anything and pretended not to see anything. Swish, swish! Many young men and women felt the slight fluctuation of aura. The surrounding gazes immediately fell on Du Xiaofu. 6:00 in the morning. I've been working hard all night, asking for flowers, support, and recommendations. Thank you to all my readers. Chapter 611. It's him, Du Xiaofu. He defeated Du Xiaofu, Yi Xian from the bronze roll in one move. Rumor has it that he is the champion of the 8th test area. He defeated the mortal king, Feng Xianyu. Naturally, he will participate in the 2nd test. After defeating Yi Xian in the Sky Marshal Square, some people immediately recognized Du Xiaofu. Whispers of discussion spread out and immediately caused some commotion in the crowd. At the same time, there were many auras in the sky that attracted everyone's attention. Swoosh, swoosh! Everyone raised their heads and saw over a dozen figures flying towards them. Soon after, they landed in front of the crowd. All of them appeared calm and composed. Even the air did not fluctuate. However, the invisible aura they emitted was sufficient to cause one's heart to tremble. The dozens of people who came were all middle-aged and above. Most of them were elders. This group of strong people were Elder Gu Qingyang, Elder Changming Zhe, Elder Husang Kuan, and the others. Greetings, elders. All the disciples bowed respectfully with respect in their eyes. Rise! A middle-aged elder took a step forward and looked at the hundreds of disciples standing quietly in front of him. He said, First of all, I would like to congratulate all of you for becoming inner sect disciples. It also confirms that all of you are talented. His voice paused for a moment before the middle-aged elder changed the topic. He said, Becoming an inner sect disciple is nothing to be happy about. Whether you're a dragon or a worm depends on the future. A temporary achievement does not mean forever. If all of you do not work hard, it will not be long before countless people who are slower than you will surpass you and step on you. Hearing this, all the young men and women seemed to be touched. Many of their eyes were filled with brilliance. All right, I will talk to all of you later. I believe the protectors have already explained the rules to all of you. After the giant rock space is opened, all of you will enter it. Run as far as you can. The people on the bronze roll will enter soon after. At that time, all of you will have a hard time. The test in the giant rock space will last for a total of 7 days. After 7 days, the 128 people with the most points will be qualified to enter the next round. The losers will have to work hard on their own. After the middle-aged elder finished speaking, he turned around and nodded slightly at Elder Gu Qingyang behind him. Elder Gu Qingyang nodded and waved his long sleeve. Open the giant rock space. Swish, swish! Whooshing sounds rang out as rays of light condensed from the hands of several elders. They gathered in the air above the valley before turning into runes and disappearing. Boom! Suddenly, the mountain valley trembled. Spatial waves rolled out and the rocks trembled. In front of the mountain valley, spatial ripples split apart. After that, a crack appeared and rapidly expanded. The giant rock space has been opened. I heard that there are no living creatures or trees inside. There are only misty suns, moons, stars, mountains, and rocks. That place is used to test the disciples of the Manchu. A disciple exclaimed in surprise. Everyone's attention was focused on the spatial crack. Walala! The cracks in the space spread out and finally formed a spatial gate, revealing a vast mountain range. The space inside was rather gray, but the surroundings of the spatial ripples were glistening with light. Swish, swish! Following the spatial ripples, the dozen or so outstanding young men and women in front of the mountain valley had already taken the lead to rush in. They passed through the glistening space, and their figures disappeared within. Swish, swish! When the surrounding people saw this, they no longer hesitated. Numerous figures surged with profound chi and swarmed in. Their figures rushed into the giant rock space. This included Du Xiaofu. Following the crowd, his figure was wrapped in a faint golden light and swiftly entered the giant rock space. Is this the giant rock space? The giant rock space was like another world. When Du Xiaofu entered the giant rock space, he was also rather surprised for a moment. His vision was hazy, and there was no green vegetation in the space. As far as the eye could see, there were only huge rocks and vast mountain ranges. There was a sense of desolation everywhere. Swish, swish! When the surrounding figures entered the giant rock space, they immediately scattered into the distance. Not many people stayed, and in a short period of time, more than half of them had disappeared. The experts on the bronze roll were about to enter the giant rock space. They could only find a place to hide as soon as possible. Once they encountered the experts on the bronze roll, one could imagine the consequences. It would be difficult to protect the energy copper talismans. Figure after figure hurriedly rushed forward. Du Xiaofu could only follow behind. Du Xiaofeng could guess from Yi Xian's cultivation and strength that if he were to encounter the 100 people on the bronze leaderboard alone, he would definitely not have an easy time. Even though he didn't know the strength of the people on the bronze leaderboard, but from Yi Xian's cultivation and strength, Du Xiaofeng could guess that if he were to encounter all the people on the bronze leaderboard alone, it would definitely not be easy. Haha, from what I see, those rookies are all fleeing forward. In front of the valley, Elder Qian Mingzi's face carried a smile as he said, "They still don't know that the giant rock space is divided into 7 regions. Every night, the 7 regions will change and shift. No matter where they flee, they will encounter the people on the bronze roll. I wonder who will be the champion this time. This year's batch of people are all extraordinarily talented. In particular, those few are even more outstanding." Elder Hu Songkuan sighed. Today's batch of disciples is indeed not bad. Elder Gu Qingyang nodded in agreement. It was undeniable that the talents of this year's batch of disciples were extremely strong. When he heard Elder Gu Qingyang's words, the eyes of a long-robed elder in the crowd secretly moved. He looked at Elder Gu Qingyang and embarrassedly said, "Elder Gu Qingyang, what rank do you think your disciple Du Xiaofu will be able to obtain this time? Will he be able to enter the top 2, or even the champion?" My disciple will definitely have no problem. It will be easy for him to enter the top 2. It's not a big deal to fight for the champion." Elder Gu Qingyang's eyes moved. At this moment, he did not have much confidence. He knew that there were many powerful people this time. Although he was very clear about his disciple's strength and had even slaughtered martial kings in the Nirvana realm, there were a few abnormal people this time. In particular, the abnormal little demon had returned to the Manchu. Therefore, Elder Gu Qingyang did not have absolute confidence that his disciple would be able to obtain the champion. Moreover, the first round was to face the bronze roll. There were also a few abnormal people on the bronze roll. Perhaps in the first round, they would snatch the energy bronze amulet from his precious disciple. At that time, he would not even have the chance to enter the top 128, let alone the champion and the top 2. It seems that Elder Gu Qingyang does not have much confidence in his disciple. If that's the case, why don't you give Du Xiaofu to us? Haha. The long-robed elder looked at Elder Gu Qingyang's expression and suddenly laughed. Bullshit. Elder Gu Qingyang did not have any demeanor. He glared at the long-robed elder and said, "Who said that I don't have confidence in my disciple? It's definitely not a problem for him to enter the top 2. Even if it's the champion, I still have a 50% chance." Is that so? Hearing this, the long-robed elder secretly smiled. He looked at Elder Qingyang with a faint smile and said, I don't know if Elder Qingyang is really confident in his disciple or not. How about this? I'll bet 3 king-grade mysterious elixirs with you. As long as Du Xiaofu enters the top 2, Elder Qingyang will win. If Du Xiaofu becomes the champion, I'll lose double. However, if Du Xiaofu doesn't enter the top 2, Elder Qingyang will lose. If he doesn't even enter the top 128, Elder Qingyang will lose double. What do you think? Elder Qingyang fixed his eyes on the long-robed elder, and the look in his eyes changed secretly. The long-robed elder seemed to be confident and wanted to bet with Elder Qingyang. Seeing that Elder Qingyang seemed to be a little hesitant, he immediately said, What's wrong? Elder Qingyang, are you still not brave enough to bet? Hao Zongwei, didn't you just lose a few king-grade pills to me? I'll fulfill your wish and let you lose even more. I'll accept the bet. Elder Gu Qingyang clenched his teeth and nodded. It was fine to bet. It wasn't like he had no chance of winning. Then I'll also bet. Elder Qingyang, if you have the ability, continue to win. Me too. This time I'll double. I don't believe it. Seeing this, the surrounding elders who had lost 4 days ago seemed to have already discussed this beforehand. Immediately, they surrounded Elder Qingyang, wanting to place their bets. The elders bet more than 4 days ago. It seemed that this time, not only did they want to win back their losses, but they also wanted to win more interest. At this time, Elder Gu Qingyang had no choice but to accept the bet. His expression changed secretly, but he still maintained confidence on his face. This is going to be troublesome. Little junior brother, you have to work hard. If you don't work hard, Master will really go bankrupt this time. Not far away, Yuanli stood quietly. Seeing that his master was accepting the bet again, he could only feel helpless. How could Yuanli not know his master's temperament and character? He was a typical example of someone who could not be provoked. The provocation was absolutely effective. If he went up to stop him at this time, he might be directly reprimanded. Elder Qingyang, I'll also bet a middle-grade Taoist instrument. At this time, Husan Kuan could not help but bet. He knew a little about Du Xiaofu's cultivation strength. He had terrifying talent and strength. But this time there were also a few abnormal people, especially that little demon. What's more, the people on the bronze list were going to go in, so there was a great chance for them to bet now. Can't sleep. Continue to write a chapter. In the morning, I'll post 3 chapters in a row, asking for flowers, asking for protection. Thank you. Chapter 612. I'll bet a mid-grade Tao artifact as well. Elder Chang Mingzi couldn't sit still after seeing Elder Husan Kuan place his bet. Elder Chang Mingzi naturally knew that Du Xiaofu was extraordinary. However, he also knew that it would be extremely difficult for Du Xiaofu to enter the top 2 with the presence of several terror overlords. Subsequently, a few elders who were originally with Elder Qiao Mingzi and Elder Husan Kuan seemed to have heard some rumors beforehand. When they saw that Elder Husan Kuan and Elder Qiao Mingzi had already placed their bets, they clenched their teeth and placed their bets one after another as well. Whoosh, whoosh! In the distance, the sound of wind breaking could be heard. Many elders stopped placing their bets, and their expressions became serious. Then they looked in the direction of the sound of wind breaking in front of them. In front of them, many figures flashed and landed in front of the valley. Upon closer inspection, there were a total of 99 figures. Every one of them had a powerful aura. Even the protectors and deacons present weren't inferior to them, especially the 10 figures in front of them. They had an imposing appearance and were extraordinary. In the middle of them, a 25-year-old man stood quietly. His facial features were sharp and handsome as if they were carved by a knife. His entire body exuded an ethereal aura. He looked at Elder Gu Qingyang and the others in front of him and bowed. Greetings, elders and protectors. Yi Xian of the bronze roll is severely injured and can't come with 99 people. Please advise us. Go in. Remember, don't be courteous. Teach those rookies a lesson. The long-robed elder called Haozongwei by Elder Gu Qingyang said loudly. He told the disciples on the bronze list to not be polite when they entered the giant rock space. At that time, Du Xiaofu might not even be able to enter the top 128. Yes, the elegant man nodded. His handsome face revealed a slightly unrestrained smile. Then his body turned into a ray of light and shot into the entrance of the giant rock space like lightning. Whoosh, whoosh! Behind him, numerous extraordinary young men and women followed, closely behind as their profound energy fluctuated. Soon after, all of them shot into the giant rock space. When the last figure entered the giant rock space, the entrance to the giant rock space began to merge. The entrance disappeared, and everything returned to normal. The show is about to begin. Those rookies don't know that entering the inner sect is just the beginning for them. In the future, they'll be crying for their parents, Elder Husankuin said softly, stroking his white beard with interest. They all started out as rookies. Those fellows on the gold roll were also rookies back then. Back then, they were also dealt with in the giant rock space until it was too horrible to look at. Elder Qiaomingzi said softly, only in this way can they become experts as quickly as possible. Elder Gu Qingyang didn't say anything the whole time. He seemed to be silently remembering the total number of bets he had just received. When he was done, his expression changed slightly. The number of bets he had received was astonishing. If he lost, the amount he had won a few days ago wouldn't be enough to compensate for the loss. If he lost twice as much, it would be difficult for him to compensate for it, even if he sold his entire fortune. 99 extraordinary figures stood in the gloomy and overcast space. Their auras slowly fluctuated. All of them wore smiles on their faces. A year had passed in the blink of an eye. They finally had the chance to make up for everything they had experienced in the giant rock space a year ago. A young man in his late 20s walked out from the dozen or so most extraordinary figures. He was wearing white clothes that outlined his sturdy and muscular body. A light green cloak covered his body, giving him a free and easy aura. He looked at the elegant young man in the middle and said, "Amo Chin, how do you want to play? Why don't you say something? Just follow the rules. No matter how we play, they will only be a bunch of rookies. The Manchu only wants us to train these rookies." The elegant young man in the middle said in an indifferent voice, "They are indeed a bunch of rookies. However, we are still short of one person on the bronze board. Yixian has been seriously injured by that kid called Du Xiaofu. This has nothing to do with us. However, it has caused our bronze board to lose quite a bit of face. That Du Xiaofu needs to be properly trained." The man in white clothes said. The pupils on the elegant young man's handsome face slightly moved, after which he said, "Don't go overboard. Du Xiaofu is Elder Qingyang's disciple." "Understood. Let's begin. It's time to take care of those rookies." The man in white clothes smiled, after which he waved his hand. Mysterious aura rippled from the dozen or so figures. They seemed to have transformed into lightning bolts as they instantly shot into the distance. "The game has begun. Rookies, we are here. Have you all hidden properly?" "Ha ha!" Disdainful laughter reverberated in the surrounding space. Then one figure after another swept through the air and disappeared into the distance in a flash. Within the gloomy space, rocks and mountain ranges were everywhere. There was no sign of life, and it was a desolate place. Swoosh! Du Xiaofu shot into the air and landed on a giant rock that was dozens of feet tall. Although he did not use his fastest speed, he was confident that he had caught up with most of the people present. Looking around, Du Xiaofu's mental energy spread out. He discovered that there were quite a few auras fluctuating in the distance. All of them seemed to want to stay as far away from the entrance as possible in order to avoid encountering those on the bronze board. Du Xiaofu's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked around. Du Xiaofu did not mind those on the bronze board. It was just that at the entrance he could not face over 100 experts on the bronze board alone and had no choice but to stay far away. But now that they had spread out, Du Xiaofu was not too worried. At the very least, among the 100 people on the bronze board, those ranked below 30 would not be a threat to him. Moreover, there should not be many people on the bronze board that could threaten him. If it really did not work, Du Xiaofu still had some confidence in his ability to escape. Swoosh, swoosh! In the air in front of him, several figures flew over. They seemed to have seen Du Xiaofu standing on the rock and immediately landed. Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows and looked over. There were a total of 7 people who landed on the ground. The one in front was a man who looked to be around 23 or 24 years old. He was dressed in a clear blue robe, and under his sword-like eyebrows, his long and narrow eyes were like gurgling spring water. They were as gentle as a spring breeze. The color of his thin lips was slightly light, and the corners of his mouth were slightly raised, making him look noble and unrestrained. The young man sized up Du Xiaofu with an aura of superiority. In his long and narrow eyes, there was a hint of arrogance. Du Xiaofu only glanced at the young man, and then his gaze fell on a woman in her 20s beside the green-robed young man. The woman's skin was not too white, but there was a faint layer of rouge in her healthy yellow skin. It was extremely attractive. Her eyelashes were slightly raised, and her bright eyes were extremely sharp like a cheetah. The woman's tight, soft armor outlined her exquisite figure, and her slender and straight legs were completely exposed. What caught Du Xiaofu's attention the most was the woman's arms. On each of her wrists there was a palm-sized scimitar that looked like daggers. There was no doubt that the woman's attire was extremely wild, but her face was extremely alluring. She could be considered as an absolute beauty. At this moment, her eyes were also looking at Du Xiaofu, and there were some fluctuations in them. Beside the woman, there was a young man in long robes. He seemed to be slightly older than the woman. His yellow robes were embroidered with golden patterns as he quietly stood there. He was also very handsome and gave off a noble and elegant feeling. He was also an extraordinary person. Behind the 3 of them, there were 4 other young men standing. They also had an extraordinary aura. Their gazes were all curiously sizing up Du Xiaofu. The first noble and arrogant young man in the middle sized up Du Xiaofu for a while before he said, "You are the Du Xiaofu who defeated Yi Xian." "What's the matter?" Du Xiaofu glanced at the young man. He could feel that the aura on this young man was extremely extraordinary. He was probably one of the best among the new inner sect disciples who had entered this time. Although his aura was somewhat arrogant, he did have the qualifications to be arrogant. It was just that Du Xiaofu felt a little uncomfortable. The arrogant young man was a little surprised. He looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "I am Su Chuyin. You should have heard of me." "I don't think so." Du Xiaofu immediately shook his head. He had never heard of this person before. However, from that fellow's tone, he seemed to be able to sense that his reputation in the sect was not low. When he heard Du Xiaofu's words, Su Chiyun's expression immediately became somewhat unnatural. How could he, Su Chiyun, not have heard of him in the Manchu? Could this brat be doing this on purpose? Su Chiyun's good demeanor and arrogance immediately caused his expression to return to normal. He looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "Then let me introduce myself. I am the number 1 in the 3rd region's assessment. Beside me is junior sister Qiao Yingmeng and junior brother Mo. Su Chuyin only introduced the 2 people beside him. The 4 young men behind him did not waste any time. They looked at Du Xiaofu and raised their eyebrows as they said, "You are a symbol master. Our group is lacking a symbol master. If you are with us, we won't have to worry too much about those fellows on the bronze rankings. At the very least, we will have the strength to protect ourselves." Chapter 613. Su Qian was very clear about Du Xiaofu's strength. He was a talisman master among 6-star talisman masters. Being able to set up a 6-star elementary talisman master and defeating Yi Xian in one move was enough to prove that he wasn't weak. If he could pull Du Xiaofu into his team, then he would have the confidence to face the people at the top of the bronze ranking. This was also because it was Du Xiaofu. If it was someone else, Su Chuyin wouldn't have personally asked and wouldn't care. If someone too weak joined his team, then they would undoubtedly become a burden. Du Xiaofu felt the aura of the 7 people in front of him. The 4 youths at the back were all at the peak of the martial lord realm. From the aura around Qiao Yingmeng and Amowin, it was clear that they were at the martial king realm. They probably weren't ordinary martial kings. Su Chiyin's aura was even stronger. If this team met people on the bronze ranking, as long as they weren't the strongest people on the bronze ranking, then they would have the ability to protect themselves. Forget it, I still like to be alone. You guys should find other talisman masters. Du Xiaofu shook his head. He didn't plan on forming a team. It was good to be alone, and it was convenient. There was no need to form a team. Once he did, it wouldn't be beneficial to him. Humph. Hearing Du Xiaofu's rejection, Su Chuyin was slightly stunned and seemed to be surprised. He, Su Chuyin, personally asked, and there was actually someone who rejected him. One had to know that many people wanted to join his team, but he didn't like them and directly rejected them. Now that he had personally spoken, Du Xiaofu had actually rejected him. This made Su Chuyin extremely unhappy in his heart. Qiao Yingmeng looked up. Her eyelashes were long and curved like a crescent moon. She opened her mouth and said to Du Xiaofu, "Think about it again. Our team does indeed lack a strong talisman master. If you join us, I will also tell you a secret. Perhaps you will be useful in this team." Hearing this, Du Xiaofu looked at Qiao Yingmeng and said, "What secret? Tell me first. If I think it's worth it, I will consider joining you guys." Qiao Yingmeng hesitated for a moment and said, "There are a total of 7 regions in this giant rock space. Every night there will be changes in the 7 regions. At that time, the 7 regions will overlap with each other, and so it's useless no matter how far we run now. We will still meet the people on the bronze ranking, so it's better to find a place to hide in first." Qiao Yingmeng, Qiao Yingmeng, Qiao Xiaofu, Qiao Yingmeng, Qiao Yingmeng, Qiao Yingmeng didn't Qiao didn't was to Yimeng's. Du Xiaofu then smiled and said to Qiao Yingmeng, "Thank you for this secret. You should find a place to hide and preserve your strength." Meng Yu. Qiao Yingmeng looked at Du Xiaofu. Under her long eyelashes, she stared at Du Xiaofu. "I said I would consider, but I didn't say for sure. Your information isn't enough for me to join you guys." Du Xiaofu said, "You lied to me. You don't keep your word." Qiao Yingmeng stared fixedly at Du Xiaofu. The aura emanating from her exquisite figure also began to become sharp. Her small mouth slightly pouted, and her body automatically adjusted into a half-defensive state when facing anger. Her figure seemed even more graceful and elegant, with curves in all the right places. This woman had the wildness of a cheetah, but also the beauty of a cheetah. She was extremely tempting. I made myself very clear. I'm only considering, but I won't join you guys for sure. Du Xiaofu smiled faintly. This woman was clearly very wild, but her name was Yingmeng. It gave people a misconception. Junior sister Yingmeng, forget it. Some people think they've climbed up a branch and have protection outside. Why bother with this kind of person? When the time comes, we won't even know how we'll be taught a lesson. Su Chuyin glanced at Du Xiaofu with hatred in her eyes. However, she knew that this wasn't the time to make a move. It wouldn't be long before the people of the bronze leaderboard were everywhere. The most important thing now was to find a place to hide. Look at you. You have delicate features. I didn't expect you to be such a shameless person. Qiao Yingmeng glared at Du Xiaofu. Her gaze wasn't any better. Her curvaceous figure trembled slightly as she said in a deep voice, "How dare you lie to me? I'll settle the score with you later." On the other hand, the young man called Amowin stood quietly without saying a word. Whoosh whoosh, after glaring at Du Xiaofu with hatred in their eyes, the 7 people left under Su Chiyun's lead. Watching the 7 of them leave, Du Xiaofu did not mind at all. He did not take it to heart. The 7 areas will overlap and change every night. Why do I have to run? After muttering softly, Du Xiaofu searched the surroundings, and in the end he found an extremely concealed small cave within a valley that was large enough to accommodate him. He sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes to rest his mind. Du Xiaofu estimated that he would pass the test as long as he hid and didn't come out during the 7 days in the giant rock space and kept the energy copper talisman on him. In the gloomy giant rock space, there wasn't any vitality or green vegetation. It was difficult to hide. Figures rushed through the space, trying to avoid the plundering of the experts on the bronze leaderboard. The 7 days in the giant rock space wasn't just a test. 3 months of energy copper talismans were also necessary to enter the ancient bronze space. If they were stolen by the experts on the bronze leaderboard, they would only be able to stay in the ancient bronze space for 10 days. Therefore, no matter what, for these newly promoted inner sect disciples, they definitely couldn't allow the experts on the bronze leaderboard to steal their energy copper talismans. Whoosh, whoosh in midair, 12 figures quickly flew past. Their auras were chaotic and their expressions were hurried. Rookies, you can't run. Hand over the energy copper talismans. Otherwise, you'll be asking for trouble. Behind the 12 people, 9 figures quickly chased after them. Their speed was much faster than the 12 people in front of them. After a few flashes, they surrounded the 12 people in midair. Be careful, let's work together to resist. Among the 12 people, there was a youth in yellow who had a serious expression. However, when he looked at the 9 youths in front of him, who were about the same age as him, he slightly gritted his teeth. He didn't think that he didn't have the ability to fight. Being able to become a newly promoted inner sect disciple and being one of the best among them, he had his own pride. However, when the 11 people around the youth in yellow heard him, they immediately formed a circle. At this moment, their faces started to turn pale. They looked at the 9 people approaching with fear in their eyes. Rookies, it seems like you don't intend to hand over your energy copper talismans. That's exactly what I want. Otherwise, it won't be fun. Among the 9 people chasing after them, a youth revealed a smile on his face. His smile didn't seem to care. Let's fight. It's time to train these rookies. A tall and sturdy youth laughed out loud. He was very excited. Profound chi surged, and symbols flew out, forming a bright light. Like a storm, it directly suppressed the 12 new inner sect disciples. None of the 12 inner sect disciples were weak. They were all geniuses from the outside world. However, the experts on the bronze roll were the cream of the crop among the previous batch of inner sect disciples. Generally speaking, they would have cultivated for a longer period of time. They had also cultivated in the ancient bronze space for a year. Their cultivation bases were much higher than those of the new inner sect disciples. Bang, bang, bang. Low energy, muffled sounds were heard. Even though the new inner sect disciples were extraordinary, under the suppression of the copper ranking experts, they didn't have much strength to resist. In a short period of time, they were directly defeated. Bang! One of the youths on the bronze board punched the chest of the leader of the new inner sect disciples, the yellow-robed youth, causing his body to fall from midair to the ground, smashing into a pile of rocks, causing the rubble to fly everywhere. Poochie! The youth in yellow spat out a mouthful of blood. His face turned pale, and the extraordinary symbol sword in his hand fell to the ground. He struggled for a while, but couldn't get up. Instead, he spat out a large amount of blood on the ground. The youth on the copper ranking landed in front of the youth in yellow. He slightly waved his fist and said with disdain in his eyes, "If you don't want to be taught a lesson, hand over the energy copper talismans. Otherwise, I don't mind breaking a few of your bones." The youth in yellow's face was extremely ugly. His eyes were faintly red. However, he could only grit his teeth and form a hand seal. Then, dazzling symbols flew out from his badge. In the end, 8 red talismans the length of an adult's palm and the width of 2 fingers appeared in the hands of the youth in yellow. The badge on his shoulder also emitted a red light. You should have handed it over earlier. Don't think that you can be arrogant just because you're an inner sect disciple. In front of the copper ranking, if you don't want to be taught a lesson, it's better to be honest. The youth on the copper ranking unceremoniously kept the 8 energy copper talismans into the badge on his chest. A faint smile appeared on his face, as if this was how it should be. Then the other 11 new inner sect disciples had no choice but to obediently hand over the energy copper talismans on their bodies. The energy copper talismans of the 12 inner sect disciples were divided among the 9 copper ranking experts. Each of them lay on the ground with wounds all over their bodies, but they were powerless. Chapter 614. Originally, these newly promoted inner sect disciples were all prideful. However, at this moment, they were no longer prideful. Sai, what kind of rule is this? They actually want one person to stay for 10 days. If they take all of them away, we can exchange them for energy silver talismans. We did the same in the past. This is just the beginning. If we find more rookies, we can exchange them for a lot of energy silver talismans. There are many rookies in front. Let's continue to fix them. The 9 of them had disdainful looks on their faces. Then they turned around and left. Large pieces of rocks formed a messy stone plaza. The surroundings were empty. Over 30 people gathered together. Their profound chi surged and their weapons were unsheathed. The air around them vibrated and rippled. Among the 30 people, there were both men and women. Their auras were not weak, especially the leader of the group, a young man with a rough body. Under his tight clothes, the muscles on his body looked as if they were going to burst out of his clothes. He looked extremely powerful. The aura of this young man was also extremely powerful. He was at the peak of the complete martial lord realm and even had some king realm aura. At this moment, there were a total of 7 young men standing in front of the 30 people. The 7 young men all had extraordinary auras. When they looked at the 30 young men and women in front of them, they smiled. Are you the people on the bronze board? The rough young man looked at the 7 young men in front of him. They had the same badge on their shoulders. However, they were not newly promoted inner sect disciples. They should be the so-called experts on the bronze board. Correct. Among the 7 young men, one of them had a clean and white face. He had thick eyebrows and a tall nose. He was extremely handsome. He looked at the rough young man and said, Are you going to hand over the energy bronze talismans, or will you hand them over after I teach you a lesson? Haha, I know that you are on the bronze board. However, there are only 7 of you. There are 32 of us. Do you think that you can defeat us? The boorish young man immediately laughed heartily when he heard this. Although he was a little wary of the people on the bronze ranking, when he saw that some of the people on the bronze ranking were around the same age as him and that there were a total of 32 of them, it was almost 5 against 1. The fear in his heart was greatly reduced, and he could not help but feel a little more confident. 32, haha! Hearing the boorish young man's words, several of the 7 people could not help but laugh. At this moment, anyone could feel that the smiles on their faces were a kind of faint contempt, as if they were mocking him. Hearing the laughter of the few young men on the bronze roll, the expressions of the 32 people changed slightly. All right, just hand over the energy copper talisman and scram. With your cultivation base, you're not qualified for us to fix you. The handsome young man with the smooth and fair face said to the rough young man indifferently, boastful words. Shame. The boorish young man shouted in a deep voice. 5 against 1. They still had some confidence. All of them were extraordinary people. How could they be so easily scared and ridiculed like this? This was clearly an insult to them. Chi! However, before the boorish young man could finish a sentence, a figure had already appeared in front of him like a ghost. The speed was beyond his imagination, and a fist landed on his chest like a meteorite. Boom! A low and deep muffled sound was emitted, causing the space to suddenly tremble, after which the rough-looking young man's body directly flew backwards. At the same time, a large mouthful of fresh blood was spat out from his mouth. Wherever his body passed, the surrounding 30-plus young men and women were directly sent flying one after another under this frightening impact. Poochie, poochie! One by one, the young men and women were sent flying backwards and smashed onto the ground. Large pieces of rock were turned into dust, and each of them spat out blood. The most miserable was still the boorish young man. His body landed on the ground, causing countless pieces of rock to fly up. Dust filled the air, and his face was as pale as ash. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. He struggled a few times, but was unable to get up. Goo goo! When the remaining dozen people saw this scene, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. Their eyes were filled with horror. At this moment, how would these newly promoted inner sect disciples dare to make a move? The strength of the handsome young man was actually so powerful. Under the crowd's gazes, the handsome young man walked out and calmly walked to the side of the boorish young man, who was unable to get up. At this moment, the handsome young man's face, which was full of smiles, had already turned slightly fierce. He mercilessly stepped on the boorish young man's chest, like a cat looking at a mouse in front of it. He said in an indifferent voice, "Don't tell me that the cultivation of a half-king is your backing. Even if you have the opportunity to step into the martial king realm in the future, I can still easily trample on you 1,000 times over." As his voice rang out, the handsome young man slightly raised his head and looked around. He said in an indifferent voice, "A bunch of people who don't know their own strength. Hand over the energy copper talismans, or else you will be properly taught a lesson." The surrounding newly promoted inner sect disciples trembled. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. The young man's cultivation was simply too powerful, not to mention that there were 32 of them. Even if there were 120 of them, they would still be taught a lesson. How would they dare to resist? One by one, they obediently handed over the energy copper talismans. In the end, the boorish young man also handed over the 8 energy copper talismans on his body, while his eyes were filled with shock. At this moment, he finally understood what it meant to be an expert on the copper roll. A few days ago, Du Xiaofu, who was also a new inner sect disciple, had heavily injured Yi Xian, who was ranked within the top 30 of the copper roll with a single move. Therefore, in his opinion, the people on the copper roll were only SOSO. At this moment, the boorish young man finally understood that it was not that the people on the copper roll were weak, but that Du Xiaofu was just too strong. It was a pity that he was not Du Xiaofu. All right, let's go. We'll leave these rookies for them to deal with. Among the 7 people, a handsome and elegant young man, who had been standing in the middle, indifferently raised his head and looked at the dusky sky. On his handsome face, there was a slight, unrestrained smile. His eyes were filled with some anticipation as he said in an indifferent voice, "It's going to be dark soon." It's said that among these rookies, there are 4 human kings and 11 elites. Dealing with them should be more fun than dealing with these rookies. That makes sense. It should be more fun to deal with these rookies. The few young men nodded with a smile. Subsequently, their figures flashed and disappeared in a few flashes. In the dusky space, the sky gradually turned darker and darker. In the end, it was completely dark. Only a faint moonlight illuminated the space, but no stars could be seen. Bang, bang, bang. In the dark night, there would occasionally be low-energy sonic booms in the surrounding space. However, they only lasted for a short period of time before calming down. In the small cave, Du Xiaofu, who was sitting cross-legged, slightly opened his eyes. The light in his eyes was bright and deep in the dark night. After that, Du Xiaofu closed his eyes again and began to rest. Everything that happened outside had nothing to do with him. It was fine as long as no one disturbed him. Bang, bang, bang! Low-energy sonic booms reverberated as if night had fallen. More and more new inner sect disciples were plundered by the experts on the bronze list. Faint cries for their parents could be heard, indicating that some of them had been dealt with extremely miserably. Time passed slowly, and the surrounding noises gradually calmed down. It should be because most of the new inner sect disciples had been plundered and the experts on the bronze roll had gradually left. Rumble! Suddenly, the entire giant rock space trembled. The rumbling sound seemed to come from the depths of the earth. The earth shook and the mountains swayed. An inexplicable aura spread out from the trembling space. Rumble! After that, the entire space seemed to be moving. The entire ground shook and rocks rolled down. The cave was on the verge of collapsing. Is the space overlapping and changing? In the cave, Du Xiaofu suddenly opened his eyes, and his figure instantly flew out of the cave. Walala! In the space, an inexplicable aura fluctuated. It made one's heart tremble. The ground shook and the mountains shook. The space rippled. When Du Xiaofu flew out of the cave, he was surprised to find that he was still at the side of the hidden cave. However, the surrounding terrain and space had already changed. It was no longer the same place. Swoosh, swoosh. At this moment, a few figures mysteriously appeared in the sky above Du Xiaofu. Haha, this newbie must have been scared silly. He must have hidden well yesterday. He didn't expect to meet us. Loud laughter could be heard. There were a total of 10 figures. The 10 of them were all extraordinary youths. They were all around the age of 20 to 24 or 25. The 10 of them had an extremely powerful aura. Looking at Du Xiaofu, a malicious smile appeared on their faces. This newbie is actually alone. Don't tell me he was scared silly. Ha! A sturdy young man in short clothes looked at Du Xiaofu with interest. After laughing out loud, he looked at Du Xiaofu, raised his eyebrows, and said jokingly, "Brat, quickly hand over the copper energy talisman so that I don't have to make a move. Otherwise, I'll teach you a lesson first, and then you'll still have to hand over the copper energy talisman." Hearing this, Du Xiaofu immediately looked at the 10 youths in front of him. His gaze swept across them. Among the 10 of them, there were 9 who had just reached the Martial King realm. There was also one who was at the peak of the Martial Lord realm and had a Martial King realm aura. Today is Thanksgiving Day. Xiao Yu is here to express his gratitude. I'm grateful to my parents and everything around me. It makes me feel happy. I'm grateful that I don't have anything around me. It makes me know who I am. I'm especially grateful to my brothers and sisters. I'm grateful for everyone's support. It's because of everyone's love and support that I can write books to make money and support my family. My interest and work are one. This is definitely a happy thing. I'm grateful to everyone. It's the end of the month. I'm shamelessly rolling on the ground, begging for flowers again. On the 30th, Xiao Yu exploded. It was not a small explosion. It was definitely a super explosion. Chapter 615. I advise you not to have any ideas about me. Go find someone else. How about we stay out of each other's business? Du Xiaofu looked at the 10 people in front of him and asked in a negotiating tone. The cultivation of these 10 people was not weak. As expected of the experts on the bronze ranking and the inner sect disciples of the ancient heaven sect, compared to the students of Tianwu Academy, they were much stronger. However, when they heard Du Xiaofu's words, the 10 experts on the martial ranking looked at each other in confusion. Haha! However, after a short moment of confusion, the 10 of them laughed at the same time, as if they had seen something new. Haha, did I hear wrongly? Staying out of each other's business? Is this brat an idiot? Can an idiot become an inner sect disciple now? The sturdy young man in the front could not stop laughing. He looked at Du Xiaofu and laughed until he was out of breath. He said, "I won't argue with an idiot like you. Hand over the energy bronze talisman, and I won't teach you a lesson. How about it? You're the idiot. Your whole family are idiots." Hearing this, Du Xiaofu immediately cursed. The people of Little Rock City had called him an idiot young master. He did not expect that there would be people calling him an idiot in the ancient heaven sect. This made Du Xiaofu unhappy. The young man in the short shirt was stunned. Then he became angry. He looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "Bastard, an idiot is still scolding people." "Who is the idiot scolding?" Du Xiaofu stared at the young man in the short shirt. His eyes shone brightly in the darkness of the night. The idiot scolded you. The young man in the short shirt scolded without thinking. Then he seemed to realize that he had gotten himself into trouble. His face immediately flushed red as he stared at Du Xiaofu and shouted angrily, "Brat, you're definitely asking for a beating!" Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, the young man in the short shirt was furious. His aura surged out, and the runes were dazzling, causing the surroundings to become dazzling. The aura of an early-stage martial king swept out like a storm, causing the nearby rocks to fly as if the mountains were collapsing. So, the figure of the short-sleeved young man appeared in front of Du Xiaofu in a flash. He was as fast as lightning. Boom! A fist wrapped in chi of runes was thrown out from the sturdy young man's hand. In front of the fist, the air waves distorted, as if it was going to explode the space at any time, and hit Du Xiaofu's chest. The surrounding 9 people had faint smiles in their eyes. In their hearts, the purple-robed brat was going to be unlucky. He would definitely be taught a lesson that was too horrible to look at. Who asked that brat to actually dare to make fun of someone on the bronze board? Bang! A low, muffled sound was heard. Everyone's vision was a little blurry. They did not see clearly what had happened. They only saw the sturdy young man in short clothes who had just attacked. His figure was like a bird with broken wings as he fell from the sky and landed on the ground. Boom! The young man in short clothes fell to the ground, blood spurting out. The earth shook and the mountains shook. The rocks cracked, and many of the broken stones were directly turned into fine powder. Goo goo! This sudden change caused the surrounding 9 people to be dumbfounded as they sucked in a breath of cold air. Oh no, this brat is pretending to be weak. He might be a human king. Let's join forces and suppress him. The remaining 9 bronze board powerhouses, 8 kings and 1 marquis, were not ordinary people. They were shocked for a short moment before they recovered from their shock. Then 8 figures rushed out almost at the same time. Waves of storm-like aura suddenly disappeared and surged out. The 8 bronze board powerhouses directly pounced on Du Xiaofu. 8 waves of terrifying chi energy attacked and suppressed Du Xiaofu at the same time. Boom, boom, boom! The terrifying attack arrived almost in the blink of an eye. It was as fast as lightning and as powerful as thunder. At the same time, it exploded around Du Xiaofu's figure. It caused a rumbling sound to resound in the night sky. The dazzling rune light illuminated the sky as if it was daytime. A terrifying wave of air swept out, causing the surrounding space to tremble violently. Numerous gazes were solemn and vigilant as they stared at the space where the energy had just exploded. The terrifying energy storm dissipated. The 9 gazes were astonished. The purple-robed youth's figure was not within it at all. He had already disappeared. His speed was so fast that even they could not see him clearly. Didn't we agree to mind our own business? You just had to provoke me, Du Xiaofu cried out. His body was wrapped in a golden, profound energy light. A domineering and ferocious aura suddenly spread out from his body. The aura was domineering and fierce. His eyes were sharp and frightening. He appeared behind the crowd like a ghost and waved his hand like a fan. Swish! Talisman inscriptions flew out from his hand. The dense layers of golden talisman inscriptions were like the golden wings of a golden-winged rock. The golden light exploded and illuminated the sky. After that, it heavily swept over the bodies of several people. Boom, boom, boom! The golden talisman inscriptions overflowed in all directions. Waves of air surged into the sky. A large area of space was directly swept out, leaving behind traces of a vacuum. The ground exploded and rocks cracked. It was a terrifying scene. Puff, puff, puff! The 3 Martial King Realm Cultivators and the peak of the Martial Lord Realm Cultivator at the peak of the Martial Lord Realm were swept out of the sky and fell down. They spat out mouthfuls of blood and had no power to resist. Chi. His figure was like a deity, changing unpredictably. The golden energy was incomparably overbearing. Du Xiaofu's figure moved forward, and almost at the same time, His fist landed on the back of a young man in white who had just reached the martial king realm. Bang! Du Xiaofu's every move contained traces of a mysterious move. When his fist landed, it was like a shock wave in the void that rushed out in all directions. Puff, puff! The body of the young man in white directly fell down, like an angel falling to the earth face first. After landing, the poor young man in white's mouth was dripping with blood. He could not even get up. The speed was too fast. With Du Xiaofu's current cultivation strength, dealing with these martial king realm cultivators was simply a piece of cake. These inner sect disciples on the bronze list of the ancient heaven sect were extraordinary. They were enough to contend with the mysterious martial king realm cultivators in the outside world. However, Du Xiaofu was the master who could slaughter the martial king realm experts in the divine light court. At this time, facing these martial king realm cultivators who had just reached the martial king realm, he was simply like a wolf in a flock of sheep. Oh no! Quickly attack with all your strength! The remaining 4 youths on the bronze list who had just reached the martial king realm shouted in shock. The 2 youths who were closest to Du Xiaofu each sent out a palm print and a fist print wrapped in powerful qi. They gritted their teeth and attacked Du Xiaofu. Are you bullying me with numbers? Du Xiaofu howled. His 2 fists were like 2 dragons emerging from the sea as he waved his hands. Golden light erupted, causing the surrounding space to be completely submerged by the golden, profound energy light, after which his fists heavily collided with the 2 youths. Immediately, the 2 extraordinary youths who were ranked on the bronze ranking were directly swept away. Ah! 2 screams were heard. The 2 young men were violently thrown away. The bones in their arms were directly broken. They spat out blood and fell dozens of feet away. They looked extremely miserable. Run! Seeing this, the remaining 2 martial king realm cultivators did not dare to fight back. After being stunned for a short while, they instinctively wanted to escape. Their figures quickly swept away. Where do you think you are going? Du Xiaofu howled madly, thinking that the experts on the bronze rankings were only SO. He was in the mood to fight, so how could he let the 2 of them leave? His figure quickly soared into the sky, his arms spread out like a giant pung spreading its wings. With Du Xiaofu's speed, how could the 2 martial king realm cultivators escape? His figure swooped down and directly kicked down. Boom! Accompanied by a dazzling golden rune light, a young man on the bronze list who had just reached the martial king realm was directly kicked down by Du Xiaofu. He fell heavily into a pile of rocks. I'll fight you to the death. The last young man felt the movement behind him. His face changed in shock. He quickly formed a hand seal and then communicated with his pulse spirit. His aura soared. In a short time, the rune light was dazzling. From the divine watchtower, a terrifying black ancient leopard rushed out. Ayo! The black ancient leopard rushed out like a living creature. Its body was covered with mysterious runes. A terrifying force swept out like a huge wave. The black ancient leopard's body was densely covered with black stripes. It shone with a cold and deep luster. It swooped down from the sky like a cheetah pouncing on its prey. It directly pounced on Du Xiaofu. Pulse spirit formed. Du Xiaofu looked at the black ancient leopard that was like a living creature and was shocked. That was the pulse spirit of the young man who had just reached the martial king realm. At the martial lord realm, cultivators could merge the pulse spirit and use the power of the pulse spirit. As for the martial king realm, the meridian soul would change once again. It could transform the meridian soul into a human form and be placed into the divine watchtower to nourish it. At this time, the power of the meridian soul was many times stronger than when it was at the martial lord realm. Only by transforming the pulse spirit and placing it in the divine watchtower could it mean that one had truly broken through to the martial king realm. However, the difficulty of this step was no small matter. It was unknown how many talented martial lord realm cultivators had stopped at this step. It was even possible that they would never be able to cross it in their entire lives. Ayo! The terrifying black ancient leopard rushed out. Its bloody mouth was so real that it even carried a bloody aura. It flickered with runes, and its aura was monstrous. In an instant, it was in front of Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu was slightly stunned. The terrifying black ancient leopard had already arrived in front of him. Chapter 616. While Du Xiaofu was stunned, the terrifying black ancient leopard was already in front of him. Du Xiaofu's figure retreated rapidly like a deity. Using the carefree steps on water, he dodged with a mysterious arc and lightning-like speed. Seeing Du Xiaofu's figure disappear under its mouth, the black panther that seemed to be alive seemed to reveal a surprised expression. Sky-shaking wings. Du Xiaofu dodged and turned around. He activated the sky-shaking wings. One of his hands was like a golden winged rock, and the other flapped down. Layers of golden talisman patterns fell from the sky, and a domineering aura swept across the sky. The black ancient leopard's gaze changed drastically. Under the aura of the golden winged rock, it trembled and revealed fear. Walala! Under the sky-shaking wings, the black ancient leopard shadow was destroyed and turned into dazzling talismans. Pucci, the young man who activated his pulse spirit, suddenly turned pale. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His body fell from the sky powerlessly. Although the young man did not cause the earth to shake, his pulse spirit was shattered. His injuries were undoubtedly the most serious among all of them. When a martial artist reached the martial king realm, their pulse spirit would transform and be nourished by the spirit gate. The power of the pulse spirit would be stronger. However, if the pulse spirit was heavily damaged, the damage to the body would be even greater. The youth's pulse spirit had been directly scattered by Du Xiaofu, and his injuries were even more severe. Although it was not fatal, it was definitely not a simple matter for him to condense his pulse spirit and take human form again. The surrounding talismans dissipated, and the night sky became dark again. Out of the 10 experts on the bronze roll, 9 were kings and 1 was marquis. In less than a moment, they were all heavily injured. Only one of them had the chance to activate his pulse spirit. A few of them finally struggled to stand up. They originally wanted to activate their pulse spirits and fight together, but when they saw the outcome of the last person activating his pulse spirit, they immediately gave up on the idea. Numerous gazes were fixed on the purple-robed youth who was hovering in midair. He was carrying a broadsword on his back. The domineering and sharp aura that he had just exuded had already been retracted. In the blink of an eye, he was as calm as the wind. The sharp gaze in his eyes was now bright and clear. It was as if he was a completely different person. The purple-robed young man just now was like a peerless beast. He was extremely terrifying, but now the purple-robed young man was calm as if he was not the one who attacked just now. At this moment, the youths on the bronze ranking finally understood why the purple-robed youth was here alone. The other newly promoted inner sect, disciples, were all in groups. It turned out that the purple-robed youth was a freak who did not fear them at all. Qi, Du Xiaofu's figure landed on the ground. Under the dark night sky, the gray space did not affect the vision of a cultivator. He looked at the young men on the bronze roll who were dripping with blood. His bright and clear eyes spun around in his eye sockets. He smiled and said, "Let me ask you something. I wonder if there is a rule in the Manchu that we, the new inner sect disciples, are not allowed to take away the copper energy talismans from the bronze roll disciples in the giant rock space?" Hearing this, the young men who were riddled with wounds looked at each other. A heavily injured, yellow-clothed young man gritted his teeth and looked at Du Xiaofu. He said, "There isn't." "That's good. I can rest assured." Du Xiaofu took a deep breath, as if he was relieved. He smiled and looked at the crowd. "This is a robbery. Hand over the copper energy talismans on you." Whoosh, whoosh! Following Du Xiaofu's words, the young men who had already stood up looked at each other. They thought they had misheard. Even the young men on the bronze roll who were lying on the ground, unable to get up, their bodies were covered in blood. They were dumbfounded. They could not believe their ears. What did you say? You want our copper energy talismans. Finally, the young man who was the first to be beaten up by Du Xiaofu looked at Du Xiaofu with an extremely puzzled expression. All the young men thought they had misheard. They had never heard of a new inner sect disciple who dared to rob a bronze roll disciple in the giant rock space. Did I not make myself clear? This is a robbery. Hand over your copper energy talismans. Otherwise, I will beat you up again. Du Xiaofu stared at the 10 young men on the bronze roll and berated them. He even waved his fists symbolically. It was as if he was an adult scaring disobedient children. At this moment, Du Xiaofu's eyes were already fixed on the badges on the shoulders of the 10 young men on the bronze roll. To Du Xiaofu, the copper energy talismans on their badges were already his. The 10 bronze roll disciples finally stood up with the help of each other. They looked at each other. Kid, this is against the rules. No one has ever dared to. The short-sleeved young man clenched his teeth. It was already embarrassing enough that 10 bronze ranking experts had been defeated by a newly promoted inner sect disciple. If the news of their bronze energy talismans being snatched away by a newly promoted inner sect disciple got out, they would never be able to raise their heads in front of others again. Bang! Before the short-clothed young man could finish his words, a purple afterimage suddenly appeared in front of him in a ghost-like manner, after which the short-clothed young man's body was once again sent flying backwards. Mouthful after mouthful of fresh blood was wildly spat out. Du Xiaofu's figure chased after him. In an instant, he appeared at the spot where the young man in the short robe had landed. Under the stunned and horrified gazes of the surrounding 9 pairs of eyes, Du Xiaofu directly sat on the young man in the short robe's lower abdomen. Who asked you to be disobedient? I'll beat you up. Du Xiaofu's left hook and right hook unceremoniously landed on the chest, neck and face of the young man in the short robe. Bang, 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 fist after fist rained down like a storm. Even though he did not use any Xian energy, one could imagine how powerful Du Xiaofu's physical strength was. Fist after fist rained down. The young man in the short robe spat out blood along with his teeth. His originally handsome face was immediately swollen like a pig's head. Even his own parents would not be able to recognize him now. Can you hand over the energy copper talisman now? After a dozen consecutive punches, Du Xiaofu finally stopped. He stared at the young man in the short robe's swollen face and asked. His hand even raised a fist. If the young man did not hand over the energy copper talisman, he would directly smash his fist into the young man's face and nose. Stop hitting me. I'll hand it over, the young man in the short robe spoke intermittently. As he spoke, blood continuously flowed out of his mouth. That's right. Are you injured? If you had handed it over earlier, you wouldn't have been beaten. When Du Xiaofu heard the words of the young man in the short robe, he immediately let go of the young man in the short robe. The expression on his face immediately became warm, like an old friend who had not seen for a long time, or like an elder who was concerned about the younger generation. However, at this moment, the young man in the short robe looked at Du Xiaofu as if he had seen a ghost. Immediately, his hand seals condensed. Within the badge, no less than 80 energy copper talismans were taken out and handed over to Du Xiaofu. The badge on his shoulder then turned red. Are there any more energy copper talismans? Du Xiaofu asked the young man in the short robe. At the same time, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the energy copper talisman from the young man in the short robe. He held it in his hand as if he was guarding a treasure. No, there's only one energy copper talisman left in the badge. The short-clothed youngster looked at Du Xiaofu with fear in his eyes. This purple-robe youngster was definitely a person who could change his face at any moment. He changed his face faster than flipping the pages of a book. If he accidentally provoked this guy again, he was afraid that he would suffer a violent beating. Hand over the last one, too. When Du Xiaofu heard this, he immediately held the young man in the short robe. The last energy copper talisman was still an energy copper talisman. No matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. With Du Xiaofu's character, how could he let it go? The young man in the short robe did not expect that the purple-robed young man in front of him would actually want to snatch the last energy copper talisman. It should be known that even if they were to snatch the energy copper talismans of new inner sect disciples, according to the Manchues rules, they would still have to leave the last energy copper talisman behind. After being slightly stunned, the young man in the short robe had no choice but to obediently hand over the last energy copper talisman in the badge. He did not doubt that if he did not hand it over, the purple-robed young man in front of him would definitely turn hostile. As the last energy copper talisman was handed over, the red badge on the young man in the short robe's shoulder dissipated and the badge became dull and colorless. Du Xiaofu took the last energy copper talisman from the young man in the short robe and smiled with satisfaction. He then looked sideways at the other 9 people and said, "What about you guys? Are you going to hand it over voluntarily? Or do you want me to continue beating you up?" The 9 people's faces immediately changed. When they heard Du Xiaofu's words, they felt a sense of déjà vu. After they entered the giant rock space, they had all said the same thing several times. However, they did not expect that their positions would change so quickly. A year ago, they were also robbed by the older disciples in the same way in the giant rock space. Let's do it again. Continue to ask for flower support. Yes. Chapter 617. I'll hand it over. After seeing what happened to the young man in short clothes, how could they dare to not hand over the talismans? They immediately took out dozens of copper energy talismans from the badges on their shoulders. The one with the most was the blue-clothed young man. He handed over hundreds of copper energy talismans to Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu didn't need to say anything again. They obediently handed over the last energy copper talisman in their badges, and the badges immediately became dim and colorless. The 10 young men's faces were extremely ugly. They were the ones who came to rob the new inner sect disciples, who knew that the position of the hunter and the prey would be reversed just as they started. Even if they had been plundered by those fellows on the silver leaderboard a year ago, those fellows on the silver leaderboard had at least left them with one last energy copper talisman. But now, the fierce, purple-robed young man in front of them did not even let go of the last copper energy talisman. In reality, after entering the giant rock space, each of the 10 youths on the bronze ranking had only plundered 2 to 3 new inner sect disciples. In total, there were less than 20 to 30 bronze energy talismans. The rest of the bronze energy talismans were what they already had. However, before these youths on the bronze roll entered the giant rock space, how could they have imagined that they would suffer such an outcome? They were actually robbed instead, and even beaten up violently. If this were to spread out, it would definitely be a disgrace to their ancestors. Du Xiaofu, kept the copper energy talismans into his Qingquan bag, but he did not immediately put them into his badge. He had a satisfied smile on his face, but his gaze was still fixed on the 10 young men on the bronze roll. The ancient sky sect's bronze roll disciples should have treasures in their Qingquan bags. The more Du Xiaofu stared at the 10 young men, the more he could not help but have the urge to rob their Qingquan bags. According to Du Xiaofu's estimation, an inner sect disciple of the ancient heaven sect, who is also an expert on the bronze ranking, would definitely have valuable items in his cosmos bag. If he could directly take them, he would definitely make a fortune. Goo, however, although this thought surged violently in Du Xiaofu's heart, he forcefully swallowed a mouthful of saliva and suppressed it in the end. He thought back to when he took the law enforcement team's Qingquan bag in Tianwu Academy. It caused a lot of trouble. This was the ancient sky sect. It was better to be careful. Therefore, Du Xiaofu had to give up on this plan. Sigh after sighing, Du Xiaofu suppressed the impulse in his heart. In the end, he had no choice but to seriously say to the 10 people around him, "You guys take care of yourselves, I'll leave first. I'll keep the matter of me taking your energy copper talismans a secret. Otherwise, you'll lose face if word gets out." Whoosh! As soon as he finished speaking, the profound energy under Du Xiaofu's feet moved, and his figure instantly disappeared. Phew! Seeing Du Xiaofu's figure disappear, the 10 bronze roll disciples finally heaved a sigh of relief. It was as if they had sent off a god of plague. After that, the 10 people looked at each other in dismay, each of them on the verge of tears. What the hell was this? As experts on the bronze list, they had originally come here to teach those new rookies a lesson. Who would have thought that in the end, each and every one of them would be taught a lesson so horrible that it was unbearable to look at? This was especially true for the short-robed young man. At this moment, his face was swollen like a pig's head. He was filled with regret. If he had known earlier, he would have listened to the purple-robed young man and minded his own business. Who asked them to think that this guy was a fool? What's that kid's name? The 10 of them were silent for a moment. Then, a young man with slightly lighter injuries asked, I don't know, but there will be someone who will teach him a lesson. If he encounters Yin Machin, Ji Aoming, or Si Ruofing, that kid will be in trouble. A young man covered in scars said hatefully. At this moment, he could only place his hope of teaching that purple-robed kid a lesson on the bronze roll terror masters. In the night, Du Xiaofu directly left. After making such a big noise, Du Xiaofu was afraid of provoking others. Du Xiaofu was naturally not afraid of ordinary bronze roll cultivators. However, Du Xiaofu did not think that all the people on the bronze roll terror masters were at the early stage of the martial king realm. Yi Xian, who was around the 30th place on the bronze roll terror masters, was already at the martial king realm. It could be imagined that the top 10 people on the bronze roll terror masters were absolutely terrifying. Early in the morning, after dawn, there was no trace of the morning light in the giant rock space. The night faded away, but the space was still gray and gloomy. The majestic mountain range was covered with bare yellow soil. Huge rocks lay in the distance, like small mountain tops. Boom! In the sky, the wind and clouds surged, and the space trembled. In the sky, 7 young men and a woman blocked the path of a chubby young man. The shocking aura was released by these 9 people, causing the surroundings to tremble. The chubby young man's face was not only round, but also big. His eyes could be narrowed into a line when he squinted slightly. The flesh on his face was piled up like a ball of oil, and the flesh slid down his neck, making it look thick and short. Layers of flesh covered his neck like overlapping waves. He was so fat that it was unforgettable. Judging from the badge, the chubby young man was also a new inner sect disciple of the ancient heaven sect. However, the strange thing was that the chubby young man was also by himself and did not form a team. Among the 8 young men and women, a thin young man stood proudly. He looked at the chubby young man and said softly, "Little fatty, if you don't hand over the energy copper talisman, you'll be punished." I hate it when people call me fatty. What can you do if I don't hand it over? Do you want the energy copper talisman? Come and get it from me, if you dare. The chubby young man was not old, at most 18 or 19 years old. It seemed that because his face was full of flesh, he still looked a little childish, but he was not polite at all when he called out, "Grandpa." "Damn, fatty, you're asking for a beating." The thin young man's face turned pale and gloomy when the chubby young man called the chubby young man master. He leaped out, and his cultivation of the early martial king realm, which was close to the peak of the martial king realm, surged out. He threw a palm print at the chubby young man. "You want to touch me? You're not strong enough." The chubby young man roared. Profound chi gushed out from his body and wrapped around his body. Looking from afar, the profound chi was like a dazzling fog that shrouded the sky. At the same time, his hand seal was formed and his right palm suddenly became dazzling. It was as if it was covered by a dazzling, mysterious rune. As the chubby young man threw out his palm print, the energy in the surrounding area surged into the palm print at a speed visible to the naked eye. It caused the palm print to gradually become transparent. The power that spread out from it made one's heart tremble for no reason. Ancient Underworld Seal. This chubby young man has actually mastered the ancient Underworld Seal. When the chubby young man made his move, the other young men and women on the bronze list were shocked. The chubby young man threw out his palm print, and it collided with the chubby young man's palm print. Bang! When the two palms collided, a muffled sound of energy was heard. The mountain rocks below collapsed, and the ground cracked. The nearby gravel and dust were lifted high into the sky. Chee, chee, chee! Under such a collision, the experts on the bronze list actually took 3 steps back. Their faces were filled with shock. On the other hand, the chubby young man only took 1 step back. Motherfucker, you're only SOSO. Do you think I'm easy to bully? After the chubby young man took a step back, he roared again. Instead, he took the initiative to pounce on the skinny young man on the bronze list. With a wave of his hand, a large round hammer appeared in each of his hands. The large round hammer was very special. It was 5 feet long, and the front part of the hammer had countless runes flashing on it. It was like a spiked club. If it landed on a person's body, even if the person was not smashed into a meat patty, there would be a few bloody holes on the person's body. Boom! The chubby young man soared into the sky. He waved his hand and raised the large hammer. Mysterious runes flashed, and he violently smashed it towards the skinny young man. This sudden change caused the skinny young man's expression to become grave. Both of his eyes flickered with brilliance before they became sharp. Rapidly changing his hand seal, the skinny young man once again formed a palm print. He channeled the energy in the surrounding area and slammed it towards the chubby young man's large hammer. Boom! As the palm print slammed out, vigorous, profound chi immediately burst out like a torrential flood. The surrounding space rippled, and a sharp explosion sound erupted in the air. Rumble! In such a collision, the runes in the air overflowed and caused a large gully on the ground below to be torn apart. Dang dang! The chubby young man was not ordinary. At this moment, the large hammer had clearly reached the level of a practitioner weapon. Moreover, it was not an ordinary practitioner weapon. Immediately, the skinny young man was fiercely pushed back dozens of steps. Chi! At this moment, after the chubby young man pushed back the skinny young man on the bronze list, his chubby body was like a flash of lightning as he directly fled. Today's update has been completed. The 40-hour countdown to the explosion has begun. Little you, continue to work hard and write. Chapter 6:18. The fat youth originally looked like he was going to fight to the death. However, he turned around and ran away faster than a rabbit. This little fatty is really going to run. The fat young man's plan was good, but the other 7 bronze-ranking young men and women around him were not to be trifled with. They had been guarding against the fat young man's escape. Therefore, in a short instant, the 7 of them were already prepared. 7 figures rushed out like lightning and directly wrapped around the fat young man in a circle. Damn fatty, you still want to run. This damn fatty is not weak at all. I didn't expect him to have reached the martial king realm. Could he be one of those human king realm geniuses? This fatty should be one of the 4 human kings and the 11 human kings. The 7 bronze roll youths surrounded the fat youth. When they saw the fat youth's strength, their eyes were filled with caution. This damn fatty is not weak. The skinny young man who had just been forced back by the fat young man also caught up at this moment. His face was a little pale. The gaze with which he looked at the fat young man no longer contained any contempt. Instead, some fear secretly surged out. Let's teach him a lesson together. This damn fatty is not weak. The surrounding people nodded. They all knew that the fat youth in front of them was not easy to deal with. Chi-chi. As the words were spoken, the skinny youth who had been at a disadvantage led the 4 of them. Boom! From martial king realm auras surged out. Then, for attacks, swept out at almost the same time and enveloped the fatty. Ganging up on me. If you want my energy bronze talisman, you will have to pay a price. The fat youth looked at the 4 people who were attacking him. He held a pair of talisman weapon hammers in his hands. His narrowed eyes became sharp. The chubby young man suddenly took a step forward after his words sounded. Both of his hands trembled as surging profound qi symbol energy surged out from his pair of large hammers. They appeared just like two bright suns as a shocking profound qi fluctuation swept out wave after wave, after which they heavily collided with the two attacks coming from the left and right. G. At the same time, the fatty had already activated his martial vein and activated his vein spirit. Within the spirit watchtower, dazzling talisman patterns surged and finally turned into the phantom of a giant bird. The illusory image of the giant bird was huge. When it spread its wings, it seemed to cover the sky. It was covered in white scales that looked like white jade. The giant bird appeared, its wings flapping at high speed. Its beak and claws were sharp, and a terrifying aura swept out from its body like a storm. It spread its wings and swept towards the two attacks in front of it. Silver-armored ancient ibis. This fatty's vein spirit is actually a silver-armored ancient ibis. When the other four people saw the pulse spirit that the fatty had activated, their expressions couldn't help but change greatly. The silver-armored ancient ibis was a demonic beast on the heavenly beast list. Moreover, this silver-armored ancient ibis was extremely rare. It was said that during the ancient times, the silver-armored ancient ibises were at their peak. At that time, the silver-armored ancient ibises were comparable to the tiger tribe and other demonic beast clans. Wave after wave of attacks collided in midair. Dazzling rays of light shot out and runes flickered. Terrifying energy fluctuations could be seen with the naked eye as they frantically swept out. Rumble, a low and bright muffled sound, rang out incessantly. A large area of the earth shook as if there was an earthquake. On the ground below, cracks spread out like a spider web. Dang dang! Under the terrifying energy fluctuations, the fatty's body was pushed back continuously. Roar! The two Martial King Realm young men who had just ascended to the bronze role under the attack of the silver-armored ancient ibis also activated their meridian souls. A large black ape and a brown armored bear roared out. The two vein spirit demonic beast phantoms emitted a powerful aura. Although they weren't at the level of the heavenly beast list, they were definitely at the top of the earth beast list. The two of them activated their vein spirits and roared. After their attacks were blocked by the silver-armored ancient ibis, they violently collided with the silver-armored ancient ibis phantoms. Rumble! The three giant vein spirit phantoms continuously collided. As the phantoms collided, the ape roared, the bear roared, and the ancient ibis screeched. The terrifying aura caused the surrounding to tremble. Bang bang! In a short period of time, the fatty was once again besieged by the two Martial King Realm youths who had just entered the bronze list. The two of them also took out their extraordinary talisman weapons, which were probably at the level of high grade. Waves of attacks rippled in the air and enveloped the fatty. Bang bang! It was difficult for two fists to fight against four hands. They were all at the Martial King Realm. The fatty was besieged by the four of them and finally couldn't withstand it. His body was swept away by the energy and was pushed back continuously. Roar! Not far away, the fatty's silver-armored ancient ibis phantom's vein spirit was also at a disadvantage under the attacks of the two vein spirit phantoms. Swish! Finally, a bear claw grabbed the silver-armored ancient ibis phantoms and tore a large area of talisman engravings, causing the silver-armored ancient ibis to screech incessantly. Uffed! The fatty spat out a mouthful of blood. The damage to the vein spirit was no small matter for a Martial King Realm cultivator. His face instantly turned solemn. He formed a hand seal and quickly retrieved the silver-armored ancient ibis vein spirit. Damn fatty! I'll let you be arrogant! A loud shout resounded. The skinny youth took this opportunity and rushed forward. A palm print fiercely slammed onto the fatty's back. Bang! Profound chi exploded. The fatty's fat body, just as it came into contact with the skinny youth's palm print that contained berserk, profound chi, fell down and directly stabbed into the ground and flew out. Swish, after the fat body brushed against the ground and flew back for more than 100 feet. The fat body of the fat man slammed into a rock that was more than 100 feet tall and stabilized itself. The rock trembled and cracks appeared on the surface of the rock from the impact. Swish, the fatty's face was pale. After struggling to stand up with the support of the huge rock behind him, he spat out another mouthful of blood. He couldn't take on 4 people by himself. Swish, swish. The 4 figures landed and their auras surged. The skinny youth in front looked at the fatty, who was dripping with blood and had been taught a lesson. A smile finally bloomed on his ashen face. With a faint ridicule, he said, "Damn fatty, can you hand over the energy copper talisman now?" The fatty used his sleeve to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. He looked at the skinny youth, gritted his teeth, and said arrogantly, "I hate people calling me fatty. If you beg me, I can consider giving it to you." "Damn fatty, you still need to be taught a lesson. You won't give up until all hope is gone." The skinny youth's face changed slightly. He didn't mind continuing to beat up the fatty. "Forget it. You just want the energy copper talisman. I'll be generous and give it to you." It seemed that he was a little afraid that the youths on the copper list would continue to attack him. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. The fatty's mind moved, and he formed a hand seal. He directly took out 8 energy copper talismans from his badge and threw them to the skinny youth. With regards to the fatty's sudden change in attitude, the skinny youth was a little puzzled when he received the energy copper talismans. Originally, the skinny youth wanted to continue to teach the fatty a lesson after teasing him. Who knew that the fatty would suddenly change his attitude and hand over the energy copper talismans. This made the skinny youth unable to find any excuse to teach the fatty a lesson. You refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. At least you know your place. The skinny youth glared at the fatty. He could only drop the matter. In any case, he had already taught the fatty a lesson. He exchanged glances with the others and planned to leave. Suddenly, just as the 8 copper list experts were about to leave, a voice that seemed to resent the fatty for failing to live up to expectations sounded from behind the huge rock behind the fatty. "You damn fatty, can you be a little more promising? Didn't you say that you hate people calling you fatty? I thought you were going to fight to the death. Why did you suddenly admit defeat? You really disappoint me." As the indifferent voice faded, a young man wearing a purple robe and carrying a wide sword wrapped in purple cloth on his back walked out. The young man looked to be about 17 or 18 years old. His face was resolute and determined. A few strands of hair hung over his shoulders. His gaze helplessly fell on the fatty who was riddled with scars. Swish, swish! As the voice faded and the purple-robed young man walked out, the gazes of the 9 people, including the fatty, uniformly landed on the purple-robed young man. Their expressions immediately changed, and they were secretly surprised in their hearts. Someone had been hiding behind the huge rock all this time, and none of them had discovered him. None of them were ordinary people. Someone had been hiding under their noses, and none of them had discovered him. This meant that there were only 2 possibilities. The first possibility was that the young man's cultivation level was much higher than theirs. The second possibility was that the young man had a profound method of concealing his aura. Therefore, none of them had discovered him hiding under their noses. The fatty's eyes narrowed into slits as he looked at the purple-robed young man in astonishment. After he clearly saw the purple-robed young man's appearance, he was slightly taken aback and his eyes widened. Then he recovered his wits and looked at the purple-robed young man. He raised his eyebrows and said, "I wanted to fight at the beginning because I couldn't admit defeat. As a man, I must act like a man. Even if I can't win, I must fight." The purple-robed young man was Du Xiaofu, who had arrived at this place last night. After robbing the young men on the copper list, he wanted to rest nearby for a while. Chapter 619. Anyway, it was useless to run far away in this space. Changes would happen every day. However, Not long after Du Xiaofu closed his eyes to rest behind the huge rock, these people appeared. It would be a waste if he did not watch the show. This was also the reason why Du Xiaofu only showed up now. He looked at the fatty, curled his lips, and continued to ask, "But why did you stop fighting after fighting for so long? You admitted defeat too quickly. I haven't had enough fun watching the show yet. I wanted to fight at the start because I'm a man. Now, I stopped because a wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him." Hearing this, the fatty couldn't help but stare at Du Xiaofu. He rolled his eyes at Du Xiaofu and said, "You know you can't beat me, yet you still want to fight. I'm not an idiot. It's just a few energy copper talismans. At most, I won't be able to participate in the next round. It's better than being beaten up now. Moreover, I won't be able to keep the energy copper talismans, even if I'm beaten up." That seems to make sense. Hearing this fatty's words, Du Xiaofu actually had no words to refute. This fatty's thoughts were quite clear. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. I've remembered all of them. Their cultivation and strength can't beat me in a one-on-one fight. Once we leave the giant rock space, we'll fight one-on-one in the Sky Marshal Square. I'll kill them one by one. As soon as he said that, a smile appeared on the fatty's face. However, when the 7 men and 1 woman saw that smile, they felt their hair stand on end for no reason. They heard the fatty's words clearly. Indeed, if they fought one-on-one, none of them had the confidence to suppress the fatty. They knew the rules of the Sky Marshal Square. If they left the giant rock space and the fatty challenged them on the Sky Marshal Square, if they didn't dare to accept the challenge, they wouldn't be able to refuse. Even if they could, they wouldn't have the face to see others in the future. When the time came for them to enter the Sky Marshal Plaza, the 8 of them knew very well that the fatty would definitely not let them off easily after hearing the fatty's words. Du Xiaofu sized up the fatty in front of him and couldn't help but think of Meng Laikai. This fatty was about the same size as Meng Laikai, but Meng Laikai was the kind of person who hid a knife in his smile. However, the fatty in front of him was a classic example of a vengeful person. He even had the treacherous nature of a fox. Whoever offended this fatty would definitely have a headache, and the consequences would definitely be severe. That's a good idea. However, if I were them, I would first teach you a lesson here so that you won't be able to cause any trouble for the next 3 to 5 years, Du Xiaofu said to the chubby youth with a smile. "You're setting me up." Hearing this, the fatty looked at Du Xiaofu. Immediately, the expression on his fleshy face turned ugly. As expected, as soon as Du Xiaofu finished speaking, the skinny youth and the other powerhouses on the bronze list immediately stared at the fatty. The purple-robed young man's words reminded them that it would be better for them to stay in the giant rock space and allow the fatty to recover for 3 to 5 years rather than being avenged by the fatty on the Sky Marshal Square. After 3 to 5 years, their strength would improve again. Even if the fatty recovered, it would be difficult for him to take revenge on them. This kid is a good person. What he said is right. Let's teach this damn fatty a lesson first, so that there won't be any trouble. The skinny youth looked at Du Xiaofu and smiled. Du Xiaofu's words had really reminded them. Not creative. Du Xiaofu lifted his gaze and glanced at the skinny youth. He said, "If you use my method, you will have to pay a price. How about this? Hand over the energy copper talismans on you, and I will let you deal with this fatty." Hearing this, the 8 young men and women on the bronze list revealed doubtful expressions. Their gazes were doubtful as they looked at Du Xiaofu. "Kid, is there something wrong with your head?" The skinny youth looked at Du Xiaofu with a slightly cautious gaze. He was unable to detect the aura on the purple-robed youth's body, causing him to be somewhat fearful. However, looking at the purple-robed youth's age, he seemed to be younger than the fatty. No matter how strong he was, how strong could he be? Therefore, the skinny youth restrained some of his fear and said, "Kid, since you reminded me, hand over the energy copper talismans on you and get lost. I will not deal with you. You are the one who has something wrong with your head. Your entire family has something wrong with their heads." However, before the skinny youth's voice could fade, a loud howl covered his voice. A purple-robed figure completely exceeded his expectations and appeared in front of him with lightning speed. Bang! Before the skinny youth could fully recover, a fist wrapped in golden light had already smashed into his chest. Buffed! As blood spurted from his mouth, the skinny youth's body was directly sent flying dozens of feet. In the end, he violently smashed into the ground, shattering many cracks and rocks. The surrounding people did not even have time to react to the sudden scene in front of them. Some of them even rubbed their eyes, thinking that they had seen wrongly. However, the reality was right in front of them. The skinny youth had been directly sent flying and was currently vomiting large mouthfuls of blood. His injuries were definitely not light. At this moment, the fatty's eyes were slightly narrowed. There was shock in his eyes, but he was not surprised. This kid is very strong. Hurry up and suppress him together. In a short period of time, the 7 bronze list experts, 6 men and 1 woman, recovered from their shock. Immediately, the 7 of them moved together and directly rushed towards Du Xiaofu. It was not like when they were dealing with the fatty with only 4 people. At this moment, there were 7 of them working together. The 7 of them rushed out in the air. Runes erupted and profound qi swept out. Some of them even held practitioner weapons in their hands and directly collided with Du Xiaofu. With the 7 of them joining hands, a terrifying attack unfurled, causing waves of violent and ferocious ripples to undulate in this gloomy and overcast space. The entire surrounding space trembled as tens of thousands of rays of light surged out. The vast and mighty aura that could destroy and suppress everything swept towards Du Xiaofu. Rumble. On the ground below, cracks directly shattered. The strength of the 7 of them working together was absolutely terrifying. At this moment, the fat youth raised his head and looked at the sky. His eyes narrowed into slits, and his gaze was grave. He could not help but suck in a breath of cold air for Du Xiaofu and secretly break out in a cold sweat. Rumble. The terrifying attack swept out, causing the space on the ground to tremble. In the blink of an eye, just as the attack swept over, Du Xiaofu suddenly waved his hand and a monstrous and dazzling light spread out from his palm. A treasure that looked like a middle-grade Dao artifact fishing net appeared in his palm. The fishing net rippled with an ancient aura. The astonishing energy rippled and then turned into a piece of mysterious runes that spread out. It was as if it wanted to cover the sky and the sun, directly enveloping a large area of attacks in front of it. This fishing net was the Heaven's Net that Du Xiaofu had obtained from the 8th test area of the ancient Heaven sect and refined for his own use. It was a middle-grade Dao artifact. Hula! Above the Heaven's Net, a terrifying energy spread out like a tsunami. Accompanied by clanging sounds, it enveloped the attacks of the 7 people and then completely destroyed them. On the Heaven's Net, dazzling mysterious runes surged like an ocean and instantly submerged a large area of space. Not good. It's a middle-grade Dao artifact. Retreat! The 7 people's faces changed greatly. They quickly retreated, but the Heaven's Net had already covered the sky. As the 7 people retreated, they were swept by the heavy energy waves that contained a kind of mysterious rune energy. It was full of strange energy of heaven and earth, so the 7 people could not break free at all. Let's join forces to break this Dao artifact. The 7 people's faces were full of horror. Waves of qi in their bodies burst out with all their strength. The runes flashed like a dazzling ball of light, emitting thousands of strands of auspicious air that rose up and was extremely dazzling. Roar! The roar of thunder was endless. The 7 people who had just reached the Martial King realm all went all out. They urged the 7 terrifying Meridian Spirit Demon Beast Phantoms to expand the Heaven's Net. The Heaven's Net has long arms, suppress. Du Xiaofu lightly shouted. His hand seals condensed, and the Heaven's Net that covered the sky suddenly erupted with a terrible pressure and dazzling rays of light. Auspicious lights poured down in the sky, spewing out endless mysterious runes. The terrifying heavens net shrouded below, causing the surrounding space to tremble. The heavens net restrained everything, directly suppressing the 7 meridian spirit demon beast phantoms and the 7 people. Du Xiaofu's original strength was enough to contend with the Nirvana realm martial king realm. At this moment, Du Xiaofu and the middle grade Dao artifact, Heaven's Net, made the 7 people who had just reached the martial king realm on the bronze ranking very strong and extraordinary. However, compared to Du Xiaofu, it was easy to imagine. Not good. The 7 people's faces changed drastically. Under the suppression and restraint, they could not resist. The fishing net Dao artifact emitted a horrifying fluctuation, endless rays of light, as if it could swallow everything. In the end, it directly suppressed and restrained the 7 people, making it difficult for them to struggle. The 7 people had no choice but to keep their meridian spirits into the gods' watchtower. If their meridian spirits were destroyed, they would be even more miserable. Swish! A fishing net spread out the light of runes, tightly enveloping the 7 people. It was like a net that caught 7 big fish as it fell to the ground. The 7 people's bodies were tightly bound together, and they could not break free from the suppression of the runes. It's the last day and a half. Brothers, throw your flowers to Xiaoyu. There will be a big explosion tomorrow. Chapter 620. Cuckoo! The chubby young man had witnessed the scene before him. After witnessing the 7 martial emperor realm cultivators being captured alive after activating their meridian spirit, his eyes, which were previously squinted like a pair of eyes, stared with a pair of perfectly round eyes. The skinny young man, who was the first to be severely injured by Du Xiaofu, struggled to get up. His face was pale and blood dripped from the corner of his mouth as he looked at Du Xiaofu. He was so shocked that he stood rooted to the ground. His face was filled with astonishment. Du Xiaofu didn't care about the 7 people who were bound by the heaven's net. Instead, he went to the skinny young man's side and looked at the shocked young man with the bronze badge. He smiled warmly and said, "Give me your bronze energy talisman." The skinny young man, who was riddled with scars, finally regained his senses. He looked at Du Xiaofu, who was right in front of him, and was fiercely shocked. He subconsciously took a step back and then took out the 8 energy copper talismans that he had just plundered from the fatty's body. He had yet to put them into his badge, and he immediately handed them over to Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu took the bronze energy talismans from the skinny young man without hesitation. He looked at the skinny young man and said, "Also, hand over all the bronze energy talismans in your badge. Those are my bronze energy talismans. They don't belong to the fatty." The skinny young man thought that Du Xiaofu wanted to stand up for the fatty. He immediately shook his head and said to Du Xiaofu, the bronze energy talismans in his badge were obtained by himself in the giant rock space. They didn't belong to the fatty. "I'm robbing because I want your bronze energy talismans. Hand them over quickly." Du Xiaofu rolled his eyes at the skinny young man. "You're robbing?" The skinny young man was stunned. His pale face twitched and his eyes widened in shock. He felt that something was wrong and couldn't come back to his senses. He was stunned. Not far away, the shocked fatty immediately ran to Du Xiaofu's side. He raised his head and said to Du Xiaofu, "You can't really want to take their bronze energy talismans. We are newly promoted inner sect disciples. Is there a rule in the Manchu that says that newly promoted inner sect disciples can't take the bronze energy talismans of disciples on the bronze badge?" Du Xiaofu asked the fatty. The fatty thought for a while and recalled all the sect rules in his head. Then he shook his head at Du Xiaofu and said, "I don't think there is such a rule." "Du Xiaofu, isn't that enough? Why are they the only ones who can snatch our copper energy talismans, but we can't snatch theirs?" Du Xiaofu asked the chubby young man in reply, looking like an old man. "That's right. Why didn't I think of that? Looks like I'm still too naive." The fatty seriously shook his head for a while and softly sighed. Then he stared fiercely at the skinny young man and shouted, "This is a robbery! Quickly hand over the bronze energy talismans. Otherwise, I don't mind teaching you a lesson." After he spoke, the fatty didn't care about his pale face and weak appearance. He rolled up his sleeves and looked like he was about to fight. "Humph, don't threaten me. This is the giant rock space. You newbies don't dare to do anything. Someone will teach you a lesson." The skinny young man's eyes were filled with fear. However, he was about to be robbed by two newly promoted inner sect disciples. If news of this spread, he would be too ashamed to face anyone in the future. Therefore, he had no choice but to clench his teeth and refuse. After he spoke, the skinny young man added, "Kill me if you have the ability. I don't think you newbies dare to do so. Why don't we mind our own business? Otherwise, you will regret it in the future. What should we do? Should we teach him a lesson again?" The fatty immediately felt a little troubled when he heard the skinny young man's words. He really didn't dare to kill this skinny young man. Let's not talk about the fact that this was a test in the giant rock space and there were no grudges between them. Moreover, they were all from the same sect. Furthermore, if they killed someone here, the Manchu wouldn't have a good ending after they left. Beating people up is uncivilized. Du Xiaofu rolled his eyes at the fatty young man, after which he glanced indifferently at the skinny young man and grinned. Then he seriously said, "If he doesn't hand it over, we will seal him and strip him naked and place him on the big rock." I don't know if anyone has stripped naked in the giant rock space before, but I believe that many people will come to watch. The skinny young man's expression immediately turned extremely ugly when he heard Du Xiaofu's words. His eyes secretly trembled as fear flashed across them. He involuntarily took 2 steps back and said, "Brat, you dare!" "Why wouldn't I dare? This isn't the first time I've done it." Du Xiaofu smiled maliciously. He had already done something like this back in Tianwu Academy. There was nothing to be afraid of. Humph, brat, don't try to scare me. I'm not a coward." The skinny young man stared at Du Xiaofu in disbelief. A new inner sect disciple really dared to overturn the heavens? He was definitely not a coward. Chi. Just as the skinny young man finished speaking, his vision suddenly blurred. A purple-robed figure appeared in front of him. A few finger imprints turned into runes that landed on his body with lightning speed and turned into a rune seal. The one who had made his move was naturally Du Xiaofu. How could the skinny young man, who was heavily injured, dodge? He was immediately restrained on the spot. The profound qi in his body and all the apertures on his body were sealed. "Brat, what are you doing? I'll definitely not let you off." Loud shouts filled with fear rang out. The skinny young man's eyes were filled with horror. He saw that the purple-robed young man was actually stripping him of his clothes. In just a few moves, the skinny young man's long robe and inner garment were savagely torn to shreds by the purple-robed young man. After that, his entire body turned cold. In a short period of time, other than a pair of red underpants, he was completely naked. "My mother!" At this moment, the fatty witnessed the scene from a close distance. An expert on the bronze roll had actually been stripped naked by that brat. He could only stand there in disarray. Gulp, gulp! Within the heavenly net, the eyes of the 7 suppressed experts on the bronze roll almost popped out of their sockets when they saw the skinny young man's red underpants. All of them swallowed their saliva. That purple-robed young man had really stripped a bronze roll expert naked. Du Xiaofu did not look at the skinny young man again. He withdrew the heavenly net and released the 8 people on the bronze roll. He stared at the 8 of them and said, "What about you guys? Are you going to hand over your bronze energy talismans? Or will you end up like him?" I'll hand it over. The only woman among the 8 people didn't dare to hesitate at this time. If she was also stripped naked by that bastard, she didn't dare to imagine what would happen at that time. She immediately took out all the copper energy talismans from her badge. "We'll hand it over too." "Me too." Seeing that the woman had already taken out her bronze energy talismans, the remaining 6 people on the bronze roll did not dare to not hand them over. The skinny young man's fate was right in front of them. They immediately handed over the bronze energy talismans from their badges. I want all the bronze energy talismans in your badges. Don't leave a single one behind. Don't make me strip all of you. Du Xiaofu kindly reminded everyone. Then he put away the stacks of bronze energy talismans. There were no less than a few hundred of them in total. As for the 8 people on the bronze roll, the badges on their shoulders had already dimmed. Their faces were also green and red. The fatty looked on from the side with a stunned expression. He had never thought that it was possible to do this in the giant rock space. After doing all this with satisfaction, Du Xiaofu smiled at the 8 people and promised enthusiastically, "You guys are smart. Don't worry, I will definitely not tell anyone that you have handed over your bronze energy talismans to me. A few hours ago, I also promised those 10 people that I would definitely not tell anyone that they have handed over their bronze energy talismans to me. Therefore, I will also keep this a secret for you guys." When they heard Du Xiaofu's words, the 8 people felt like crying but had no tears. It turned out that they were not the only group that had been robbed. This purple-robed young man had robbed the other 10 people on the bronze roll a few hours ago. Then the expressions of the 7 people changed, as if they felt that something was wrong. Was this what the kid meant by keeping this a secret? If this kid could keep this a secret, how would they know that someone else had been robbed? Thinking of this, these people's expressions became even more unsightly. Your red underwear is very special. Don't tell me that you are 24 years old today. Du Xiaofu turned around and looked at the disheveled young man with red underwear with interest. He said indifferently, "I don't know if you can hand over your bronze energy talismans to me now. It's fine if you don't. The restriction seal I set up is not something that can be broken by ordinary people. You just have to stay here and wait for the Munchuous powerhouses to find you when the time comes. I'll give you the bronze energy talismans. Hurry up and let me go." "Let me go!" the skinny young man howled. His eyes were filled with fear. He was really scared. The purple-robed young man before him was a demon. There was nothing that he wouldn't do. "Sai, if you had handed it over earlier, everything would have been fine." Du Xiaofu sighed regretfully as he removed the restriction seal on the skinny young man. Today's update is complete. Tomorrow's big break. Chapter 6:21. The skinny young man immediately picked up the badge on the robe and handed it to Du Xiaofu. He then took out a robe from his chinquan bag and covered himself with it. His face was ashen. "Don't worry, I'll keep it a secret. My mouth is tight." Du Xiaofu put away the energy copper talismans and smiled in satisfaction. He didn't stay any longer and left. Seeing that Du Xiaofu had finally left, the young men who were ranked on the bronze ranking felt as though they had just sent off the god of plague. Seeing Du Xiaofu leave, a young man in luxurious clothes raised his head and looked at Du Xiaofu's back. He gritted his teeth and asked loudly, "Can you leave your name behind so that we know who killed us today?" "His name is Du Xiaofu. If you want to take revenge, I'm afraid there's no hope for you." The fatty looked at the young man in luxurious clothes as he replied, and then his gaze glanced at the young men and women on the bronze rankings in the surroundings. This was a place of trouble, and it wasn't advisable to stay here for long, so he immediately followed behind Du Xiaofu and left. Early in the morning, in the ancient heaven sect, the blue sky set off the tall and huge mountains. Under the morning sun, a few white clouds cast their shadows on the mountains. The peak of the mountains was surrounded by wisps of clouds. The scenery was moving. On a mountain peak not far away from the giant rock space, a dozen or so elders were gathered together with smiles on their faces. "Hee, Du Xiaofu has probably been taken care of by Si Ruofeng and the others, right?" "Of course. I have heard that Si Ruofeng, Jiaoming, and the rest have already discussed this matter. That brat Du Xiaofu has touched a person on the bronze ranking. Within the giant rock space, we will naturally teach that brat Du Xiaofu a lesson. With Si Ruofeng and the others taking action, they will definitely win this time. Haha, I'm afraid Elder Qingyang is going to lose everything he has this time. A few elders smiled. They were in a good mood when they thought about how they would make a fortune in a few days. Elder Changmingze, Elder Husanquin, and the others were also among them. When they heard the discussion of the elders, they became more and more determined. The treasures they had bet would probably double soon. Elder Husanquin and the others had decided to bet on Du Xiaofu because they had heard the news beforehand. It was said that the most terrifying masters on the bronze roll had declared that they would settle the score with Du Xiaofu in the giant rock space. Elder Husanquin and the others all knew that Du Xiaofu was not ordinary. The terrifying terror kings on the bronze ranking were the terrifying terror lords on the bronze terror. Do the terrifying terror lords terror. As the terror lords, the terror. Terror Mountain, the mountains, Forest Mountain, is Lu Mountain's mountain. There was a towering mountain surrounded by lush greenery. Within the mountain stream, there was a gurgling stream that was full of vitality. The mountain peak was surrounded by clouds and mist. In the distance, there were thousands of mountains that were undulating, magnificent, and boundless. In front of the precipice, a 7-foot-tall middle-aged man in green clothes and black hair stood quietly. The middle-aged man's green robe was embroidered with green patterns. His robe was turned up, making him look elegant and graceful. Sect Master, a figure hurried up the mountain peak. As the voice faded, an old man in his 50s landed in front of the middle-aged man. His face was filled with shock and astonishment. The middle-aged man in green robes was the current sect master of the ancient heaven sect, Sima Tashing. In the Central Plains, he was a figure that could shake the entire Central Plains with a stomp of his foot. Although Sima Tashing was not old, he was already a top expert whose name shook the entire Central Plains. Protector, how? You were watching the giant rock space from the third elder's place. Did something happen there? Sima Tashing's face turned serious when he saw the old man. If there was a problem in the giant rock space, it would not be a small matter. Something big has happened. Protector Hao's face was a little twisted. He looked at the middle-aged man and said, "The third elder specially sent me to inform the sect master that a kid has appeared in the giant rock space. He has already eliminated 2 groups of people by himself, a total of 18 disciples on the bronze rankings." Sima Tashing raised his eyes when he heard this. He looked at Protector Hao and said, "A single person dealing with a group of people on the bronze rankings every time?" Protector Hao nodded slightly and took a deep breath. He looked at Sima Tashing and said, "That kid didn't just fight alone. He dealt with 2 groups of people on the bronze rankings, 1 against 10, and he was even able to trample on those fellows on the bronze rankings. Who is that kid?" Sima Tashing's eyes trembled as he immediately asked. He knew very well what it meant to trample on 10 disciples on the bronze rankings by himself. "It's not Su Chuyin and the others. It seems to be the new disciple of Elder Gu Qingyang." Protector Hao looked at Sima Tashing, swallowed his saliva, and then said with a bitter smile, "Not only did that brat trample on the 18 fellows on the bronze rankings, he also took away all the energy copper talismans from them." Protector Hao seemed to want to emphasize something and added, "That kid is too ruthless. He didn't leave a single energy copper talisman for others. He took them all. Are those fellows on the bronze rankings willing to be robbed?" Sima Tashing frowned. Given his understanding of the characters of those prideful fellows on the bronze rankings, they would never be robbed so easily. Of course not, but that kid is too ruthless. Not only did he beat them up, but he also stripped the clothes of one of the fellows on the bronze rankings as a public display. Protector Hao couldn't help but roll his eyes. He had been in the ancient heaven sect for so many years, but this was the first time he had seen such a cruel disciple. Interesting, really interesting. That kid seems not only cruel and shameless, but he is also cunning. Sima Tashing's slightly frowned brows suddenly loosened. A smile appeared on his handsome face as he said softly, Beyond my expectations, it has already exceeded my expectations. Sect Master, there has never been a disciple who has robbed a bronze roll disciple in the giant rock space. What should we do? Should we intervene? Third Elder is a little worried. If we let that brat continue to cause trouble, I'm afraid that the trial in the giant rock space will be affected by that brat. Protector, how asked Seema, taxing. There's no rule in the sect that says that a new inner sect disciple can't rob a disciple on the bronze rankings. Seema Tashing smiled and continued, let's continue to watch and see how far that kid can go. Aren't there still Ian Machen, Ji Yaoming, and Si Ruofing on the bronze rankings? I understand. I'll go and tell Third Elder what you mean. Protector Hao nodded and then left in a hurry. After Protector Hao left, Sima Tashing slightly raised his head and murmured, Good kid, I'd like to see how far you can go. On the distant vast continent, there were overlapping mountain ranges and continuous, huge cities. It was as if a black, ancient dragon was winding its way across the horizon. Not long after dawn, the morning sun poured down. A lady wearing an orange-red tight dress stood quietly on the peak of the mountain. Her long and slender legs and her small waist that could not be hugged caused her originally tall figure to appear even more slender and enchanting. Her appearance was extremely moving. You survived a great disaster. Why didn't you just stay in the dark forest and be the leader of the World Alliance and wait for me to come back? Why did you come to the Central Province and kill so many people in the Divine Court? You've made a big trouble this time. I can't find you now. The enchanting woman frowned slightly and looked at the sky in the distance with a worried expression. She murmured, As long as I can succeed in the Divine Court secret realm this time, I should be able to help you deal with the sect. But during this time, don't provoke the Divine Court again. Senior Sister Shangnan, why are you still up there? I heard that the reincarnated Saint Son of the Great Wheel sect has come. Let's go and see. I heard that the reincarnated Saint Son is a dragon among men and a genius of heaven and earth. A clear voice came from the mountainside. The enchanting woman turned back and replied to the mountainside, Okay, I'm coming. As soon as she finished speaking, the enchanting woman tapped her feet lightly. Her graceful figure immediately outlined a seductive and graceful arc in the air and then swept down the mountain. The continuous range of peaks was filled with an ancient aura. Within the elegant courtyard and winding corridors, a slender woman who seemed to be in her 20s stood there in a long dress. She was quite delicate, and her bright eyes stared at a young man in bluish-purple robes. She said with a slightly reproachful tone, Why didn't you bring him back? With his talent, it should have been easy for him to join a sect. He came to the Central Plains alone. What if something happened? The young man was tall and straight. He was Guoming of the Profound Talisman sect. Looking at the woman in front of him, he smiled bitterly. Senior Sister Zhu Shui, I want Brother Xiaofu to join our Profound Talisman sect, but he doesn't want to. I can't do anything about it. Guoming was helpless. Then he patted his chest and promised the woman, saying, But don't worry. With Brother Xiaofu's current strength, I'm afraid that even in the Central Plains, there won't be any problems among his peers. It's not like you don't know how abnormal he is. The woman's eyebrows were curved and her face was as white as jade. She was beautiful. Her clothes were not very luxurious, but her eyes were bright and spirited. Her cheeks were slightly dimpled. She was also very beautiful. It took me 2 hours to fix the wrong words. That's why I'm only updating now. It's the last day at the end of the month. Brothers, please support me with flowers. Chapter 6:22. At this moment, the rays of the morning sun shone on the woman's face, making her skin seem even more translucent. She looked at Guoming with her bright eyes and said worriedly, No matter how strong he is, this is the central state. There are as many strong cultivators as there are clouds in the sky. Outstanding talents come forth in large numbers, and the human king stands proudly. All right. I'll think of a way to ask the outer sect disciples to help me inquire about the news. When I find Brother Xiaofu, I'll immediately tell you. Then you can go and find him." Guoming said helplessly. "Who said I am going to find him?" Zhu Shue's bright eyes instantly glared at Guoming, while a wisp of redness crept up her face, and then her beautiful figure turned around and left. Why are all women so weird? Why is she blushing? Guoming touched the back of his head and left. In the dark and gloomy space, there were rocks everywhere. Swoosh, swoosh, two figures flashed past. The one in front was a young man in a purple robe who was around 17 or 18 years old. He had a purple cloth wrapped around a broadsword on his back. His face was resolute. Behind him was a fat man. He was wearing a loose robe and his stomach was bulging. The muscles on his neck were like waves as he chased after the young man in the purple robe. "Du Xiaofu, you are so mean. You were hiding behind him. Why did you only come out after I was beaten? It would have been better if you had come out before I was snatched away. I heard that you are a martial artist and talisman cultivator. Is that true?" The fat man chased after him and kept talking. "Fatty, why are you following me?" Du Xiaofu finally couldn't take it anymore. He landed on a rock in the valley and asked the fat man who was chasing after him. The fat man landed. His body looked fat, but it was unusually light. He didn't have a trace of dust on him. He was like a light swallow. After stuffing a pill into his mouth, the fat man looked at Du Xiaofu with a pale face and smiled. "Actually, I am here to help you." "Help me?" Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows and glanced at the fat man. "What can you help me with? Moreover, I don't need anyone's help." "You definitely need someone's help." The fat man looked at Du Xiaofu with certainty and said, "Before entering the giant rock space, I heard a piece of news about you. Do you want to hear it?" "About me?" Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows and said to the fat man, "Let's hear it. You defeated Yi Xian, who is ranked 29th on the bronze roll, in a single move on the Sky Marshal Plaza. This is an absolute insult to the people on the bronze roll. I heard that a few terrifying fellows on the bronze roll have already discussed this. They're going to teach you a lesson in the giant rock space. They will teach you a lesson as miserably as they can teach you a lesson." The fat man told Du Xiaofu seriously. He didn't make up this news. He really did hear it by accident. Du Xiaofu didn't doubt the fat man's words. His gaze wavered slightly as he looked at the fat man and said, "Since that's the case, won't you be unlucky if you follow me?" "Why follow me?" "I'm not afraid. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm just loyal and sentimental. Since you helped me deal with those people on the bronze list who beat me up, I naturally have to repay you." The fat man patted his meaty chest and said to Du Xiaofu in an imposing manner, "Although I'm not as strong as you, once I recover to my peak, I will definitely be able to help you fend off one or two of those people who come looking for trouble with you. Say something that's believable." Du Xiaofu rolled his eyes at the fat man. This sinister fat man was even worse than Meng Laikai. It would be strange if he believed that this fat man was loyal and sentimental. Du Xiaofu wouldn't believe him even if he was beaten to death. The fat man chuckled when he heard this. He looked at Du Xiaofu a few times and suddenly changed the topic. The fat on his face moved slightly as he said, "Actually, I want to follow you to rob those people on the bronze list." "Fatty, I don't plan on bringing you along." Du Xiaofu shook his head rudely. He didn't want to bring this fatty with him. Moreover, it was a sinister fatty. Du Xiaofu was a little worried. Who knew when this sinister and cunning fat man would bite him back? If that happened, it would be too late for him to regret. "I've told you all my secrets. If you don't bring me along, it won't make sense. Moreover, if you bring me along, I won't have to share the energy copper talismans with you. You take 90% and I only need 10%. The fat man said seriously, "I can do it alone. Why should I bring you along?" Du Xiaofu shook his head and looked at the fat man. "You hate it when people call you fatty. I've always called you fatty. Why do you still follow me? It's okay if you call me fatty. You're stronger than me. I can't beat you anyway. The fat man didn't care at all. Du Xiaofu was taken aback. He actually had a feeling of speechlessness. Don't follow me anymore. Be careful, or I'll let you strip me naked and stand here for a few days. Du Xiaofu didn't want to be entangled with this fat man. He turned around and left. All right, if you really don't want to, then I won't follow you. But can you at least return the energy copper talisman that those bastards snatched from me? Otherwise, I'll be eliminated and won't be able to participate in the next round. Looking at Du Xiaofu's back, the fat man said helplessly. He really didn't dare to continue chasing. He had seen that guy's savagery and shamelessness with his own eyes. He didn't doubt that guy would strip him naked. I didn't take the energy copper talismans from you. I took them from those people. Why should I give them to you? Du Xiaofu walked away. His indifferent voice came. If you have the ability, acknowledge me as your big brother, and I'll return the energy copper talismans to you. Heaven and earth are my witnesses. Today, I, Hao Guan, acknowledge Du Xiaofu as my big brother. I don't ask to be born in the same year, month, and day, but I ask to die in the same year, month, and day. In the future, we'll share blessings and misfortunes. If I violate this oath, I won't be able to find a wife for the rest of my life, and I'll grow fatter and fatter. Du Xiaofu's figure paused. He suddenly turned around and looked behind him. He saw that the fat man was actually seriously bowing to heaven and earth. He even directly kowtowed. Seeing the scene, Du Xiaofu was also stunned. His eyes were filled with astonishment. After respectfully kowtowing 3 times to the gray sky, the fat man immediately stood up and strode to Du Xiaofu's side. With a serious face, he bowed to Du Xiaofu and said, "Little brother greets big brother." Du Xiaofu looked at the fat man. He felt that there was something in his heart that made him panic. However, he was stunned and didn't know what to say. Phew! After 3 breaths, Du Xiaofu directly took out 8 energy copper talismans. He stuffed them into the fat man's hand and said, "I'll return the energy copper talismans to you. Goodbye." After saying this, Du Xiaofu turned around and left. He felt that the farther he was from the fat man, the better. The fat man put the energy copper talismans into his badge. The red energy copper talismans immediately became bright again. He then continued to follow Du Xiaofu and said with great enthusiasm, "Big brother, where are we going now?" "I've returned the energy copper talismans to you. Why are you still following me?" Du Xiaofu strode away and didn't linger. The fat man strode to catch up with Du Xiaofu. He looked sideways at Du Xiaofu and said, "I've already acknowledged you as my big brother. If I don't follow you, who will I follow? I just bowed to the heavens and earth. We'll share blessings and hardships together. I don't ask to be born in the same year and month, but I ask to die in the same year and month. If you don't bring me along and I die in danger, I'll bow to the heavens and earth. If my oath comes true, then you will also. Don't say any more. Stop." Du Xiaofu's figure suddenly stopped. He almost directly covered the fat man's mouth. "Big bro, does this mean you've agreed to take me along?" Fatty chuckled. His eyes curved into crescents as he smiled. Phew! Du Xiaofu took a deep breath. He couldn't wait to slap his own mouth. He just said something stupid. He didn't expect to provoke such a fat man. After adjusting his emotions, Du Xiaofu looked at the fat man helplessly and said, "Okay, I'll let you follow me. However, there are rules. You have to listen to me. Otherwise, you don't have to follow me." The fat man nodded without hesitation and said with a smile, "No problem. I'll listen to Big Brother." Du Xiaofu asked helplessly, "What's your name?" "Judge Hao." The fat man smiled. "I know you're fat. I'm asking you what's your name?" Du Xiaofu rolled his eyes at the fat man. The fat man was also helpless and said, "My surname is Hao. My name is Judge. Judge as in judge. Judge Hao." Du Xiaofu looked at Judge Hao. This name, coupled with this fat man's body, made him feel helpless. The continuous mountain range was enshrouded in dense mist. This was a paradise on earth. The mountain peaks were towering and the mist lingered. There were also extraordinary spiritual herbs everywhere. The energy of heaven and earth was astonishing. On the mountain peak, there was a girl who looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. Shadows condensed in her hands. As the girl's hand seals condensed, there was a dazzling white light around her body. It was like a divine light enveloping and spreading. A vast pressure spread out. Waves of heaven and earth energy suddenly fluctuated rapidly from the surrounding air. Chapter 6, 23. The girl wasn't old, but her body was already curvy. Her delicate and childish face was like a jade carving. It wouldn't take long for her to be born and amaze the world. Boom! When the last hand seal was formed, the young lady waved her hand and a 6-star mysterious soul, symbol master level power, swept out. Her hair danced in the air and the surrounding space trembled. Then, a pair of delicate hands unexpectedly formed 23 array flags. The 23 array flags emitted a frightening fluctuation. At this moment, all the energy within the young lady's body seemed to have been poured into the 23 array flags, causing her somewhat tender face to begin to show some paleness. At the age of 15 or 16, a 6-star mysterious spiritual symbol master was able to set up a 6-star Permethought talisman array. If there were people from the outside world here, they would probably be astonished. She was only 15 or 16 years old. In this world, which top juniors from big clans and forces could reach such a stage? Walala! The 23 formation flags disappeared in the girl's palm. On her pale and delicate face, her eyes were clear and pure. It was so clean that it made people feel as if they didn't belong to the mortal world. She curled her lips and muttered, "My spiritual soul power is still lacking. I can't support it with my celestial chi. I can't set up a perfect talisman array. I'm afraid I'll be scolded by Master when he comes back." If there were experts from the outside world who heard the girl's words, they would probably be depressed. At the age of 15 or 16, a 6-star mysterious spiritual symbol master was still not satisfied with setting up a 6-star Permethought talisman array. She actually wanted to set up a 6-star perfect talisman array with her 6-star mysterious spiritual symbol master cultivation. She was simply a monster. She simply didn't want her peers from the outside world to live. After sighing, the girl looked at the clouds in the distance for a moment. Her delicate red lips opened slightly as she said, "Brother Xiaofu, where are you now? I will cultivate well. When I become stronger, Master will agree to let me out. At that time, I won't need your protection anymore. You have to work hard too. Don't be surpassed by me." Chirp, chirp! Suddenly, a sharp and clear cry was heard. A huge green bird flapped its wings and flew over from the clouds in the sky. The giant cyan bird was enormous, and its cyan feathers were suffused with flowing light. Its appearance was extremely moving, and it was incomparably noble. Its aura spread out, as if it was the emperor of all birds. The giant green bird hovered in midair, its black eyes shining brightly. It blinked and said to the young girl, "Sister Xingyu, your master is back." "Ah, is Master back?" Hearing this, a smile immediately appeared on the young girl's face. Her graceful figure flew out, drawing a beautiful arc in the air before landing lightly on the giant green bird's body. She said, "Quickly take me to Master. I miss Master too." In the gray and misty space, the 8 young men and women on the bronze roll looked dispirited. Their faces were green and red as they stood in front of a dozen young men. These dozen young men all had extraordinary temperaments. The aura around them slowly fluctuated, causing the hearts of the 8 young men and women on the bronze roll to tremble. They did not dare to look directly at them. Among the dozen young men with extraordinary temperaments, a young man in white who looked to be 24 or 25 years old walked out. His gaze swept across the 8 people who were in a sorry state, and he said indifferently, "Can any of you tell me what is going on?" The young man's tone was indifferent, but it revealed an aura that was difficult to refuse. His white clothes outlined his sturdy and muscular body, and he was covered with a light cyan cloak, which added to his free and easy temperament. The young man in white stood there quietly, and it was enough to make the hearts of the 8 young men and women tremble. Senior Ruofoam, it's Du Xiaofu. That brat used a middle-grade Dao artifact and snatched us. A young man in luxurious clothes replied. At this moment, he did not even raise his head when facing the young man in white and the cyan cloak. He did not dare to look directly at him. The young man in white and the cyan cloak raised his gaze indifferently and continued to ask, "He alone snatched the 8 of you?" "Yes." The young man in luxurious clothes bit his lips and nodded forcefully. He added, "That brat has a middle-grade Dao artifact on him. He is really too strong. A loss is a loss. Our skills are not as good as others. Why blame the middle-grade Dao artifact? The 8 of you were still snatched. The reputation of the bronze roll has been lost because of you." The young man in white and the cyan cloak glanced at the 8 people indifferently. Then he smiled faintly and said softly, "Du Xiaofu, interesting. Really interesting." In the misty space, huge rocks stood tall like small mountains. The entire space was like a huge stone forest. The stone forest was crisscrossed like a maze. No wonder there was a rumbling sound last night. Then I saw many people. Fortunately, I escaped quickly. But Big Brother, are we really just going to wait here? Are we not going to rob? In the stone forest, on a rock, Hao Bian looked at Du Xiaofu and muttered. He was like a chatterbox, talking nonstop. "Can you rest for a while?" Du Xiaofu, who was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed to rest, could not take it any more. He raised his head and glanced at Hao Bian. It was really hard to imagine that the ancient Heaven Sect's outstanding talent was actually a chatterbox. However, along the way, Du Xiaofu heard a lot of news from Hao Bian's chatterbox. For example, among the newly promoted inner sect disciples, there were a total of 4 human kings and 11 outstanding talents. Hao Bian was also one of the 11 outstanding talents. This shocked Du Xiaofu. As expected of the ancient Heaven Sect, one of the 9 major forces of the Central Plains, among the newly promoted inner sect disciples, there were actually 4 human kings and 11 outstanding talents. This was enough to frighten people. In the entire Central Plains, how many human kings and outstanding geniuses were there in the 9 major forces? Furthermore, there were probably many human kings and outstanding geniuses from other forces as well. It was no wonder that some people said that in the Central Continent, heroes rose together. There were many outstanding people, and the King of Men stood there. There was an endless stream of peerless talents, and their names shook the world. At this moment, Du Xiaofu finally understood. "Okay, I won't talk anymore. I'll also meditate for a while." Judge Hao was very tactful and no longer spoke. He sat cross-legged, not far from Du Xiaofu. The fat body sat down and looked like a round meatball. After stuffing a few more pills into his mouth, Judge Hao finally began to regulate his breathing and heal his injuries. Seeing this, Du Xiaofu also closed his eyes and meditated. There was no need to run in the giant rock space. Anyway, at midnight, there would be changes again. At that time, who knew where they would appear again? However, Du Xiaofu did not have the time to meditate. In the mountain forest, there were people passing by from time to time. Many of the newly promoted inner sect disciples were in groups of 3 to 5, while others were in groups of 10. In a few hours, they had passed by no less than 7 groups. However, only a group of newly promoted inner sect disciples had a badge on their shoulders that was emitting light, proving that they had not been robbed by the experts on the bronze roll. However, the other 6 groups of newly promoted inner sect disciples had a dim glow on their shoulders. Each of them looked miserable and battered. Some of them were even covered in wounds. It was obvious that they had been robbed clean. When these newly promoted inner sect disciples saw Du Xiaofu and Hao Bian sitting cross-legged in the stone forest, they seemed to recognize Du Xiaofu and Hao Bian. Their faces changed slightly, but they did not dare to disturb them and hurriedly left. After Hao Bian adjusted his breathing, he was not affected at all. He continued to adjust his breathing and recuperate for a few hours. A layer of dazzling light enveloped Hao Bian's meatball-like body. Within the light, there was a fluctuation of profound qi. It was as if there were small snakes of energy shuttling back and forth. It was extremely mysterious and gave off an ancient aura. Feeling the fluctuation of profound qi from Hao Bian's body, Du Xiaofu also paid more attention. That kind of profound qi was not ordinary. The cultivation method that Hao Bian cultivated was also not simple. This guy seems to be not simple, Du Xiaofu said in his heart. Hao Bian, other than being a chatterbox and a little sinister, his talent and strength were indeed not simple. He might not be able to fight against 4 people of the same cultivation on the bronze roll. However, if he were to fight against 3 cultivators of the same cultivation in the outside world, it would not be a problem for him to fight against 4 people of the same cultivation. Suddenly, Du Xiaofu's gaze that was on Hao Bian's body suddenly shifted to the distance. Whoosh, whoosh! In a short period of time, in the air in front of the stone forest, several figures flew over. After a few flashes, they appeared in the air above the stone forest. Waves of energy, fluctuations, swept up the gravel below. A total of 8 figures came over. Their expressions were hurried, and their speed was extremely fast. In an instant, they appeared in the air above the stone forest. Little rookies, you won't be able to escape. Behind the 8 of them, there was a group of people chasing after them. Loud shouts and laughter resounded through the sky. It's Du Xiaofu. He's down there. Let's go down. Among the 8 figures in front, a delicate voice sounded out. Then, a beautiful figure took the lead and landed not far from Du Xiaofu. The one who landed was a woman in her 20s wearing soft armor. The soft armor outlined her exquisite figure, revealing her slender and straight legs. On each of her wrists, there was a palm-sized scimitar that looked like daggers. Her healthy yellow skin faintly revealed a layer of rouge. Her bright eyes were as sharp as a female cheetah's. Chapter 6:24. It's her! Du Xiaofu naturally wouldn't forget this woman. She was Qiao Yingmeng, who he had met yesterday when he first entered the giant rock space. However, Qiao Yingmeng's expression was grave, and she was in an extremely sorry state. Her moving face was pale, proving that she had just experienced a bloody battle. Whoosh, whoosh! After Qiao Yingmeng landed, another 7 figures hurriedly landed. The one in front was a man in blue who looked to be around 23 or 24 years old. Under his sword-like eyebrows, his long and narrow eyes were like spring water. However, this young man's gaze was originally as gentle as a spring breeze, but now his face was pale, and he seemed to be in a sorry state. Beside the blue-clothed young man was a noble young man in a light yellow robe with golden patterns. He was handsome, but his expression wasn't much better than the blue-clothed young man and the woman. There were also 4 young men and a young woman. They all had extraordinary temperaments, and their faces were pale. Du Xiaofu looked around. Originally, there were only 7 people in this group, but now there were 8. The other woman should have joined later. Spirit Talisman Master! Looking at the other woman, Du Xiaofu probed her aura. She was clearly a spirit talisman master. As for the woman, Du Xiaofu felt a sense of déjà vu, as if he had seen her somewhere before. The woman was about the same age as Qiao Yingmeng. She was only around 20 years old. Her skin was whiter than snow, and she was incomparably beautiful. She had elegant eyebrows, phoenix eyes, jade cheeks, and cherry lips. She could be considered a beauty. Although this woman lacked the wild beauty of Qiao Yingmeng, her delicate beauty was something that Qiao Yingmeng didn't have. At this moment, this delicate and beautiful woman was sizing up Du Xiaofu with her bright eyes. From the fluctuations in her gaze, she clearly recognized Du Xiaofu. It seems to be her, Du Xiaofu finally remembered. Back then, in the examination area of the ancient sky sect on the last mountain peak, there was a formation that trapped several young men and women. One of them was this delicate and beautiful woman, who, As the 8 people landed, Hao Bian, who was meditating, immediately woke up. After spitting out a mouthful of turbid air, he looked at the 8 people and his expression changed. Bai and immediately came to Du Xiaofu's side and said, "Big brother, the one in blue is called Su Chuyin. She is a human king stage master. She's not bad. The one in armor is called Qiao Yingmeng. The man is called Mo Win, and the woman Mu Jejia is Mu Jejia. The 3 is Jejia. Du's is Jejia was Jejia. Jejia. Jejia Ajia. Ji Lu Jejia. Jejia Ju Ajia. S Ju was Ju. Jejia Jen was a Ju. Ju was Ju. According to what Xiao Yingmeng knew, the fatty's temper was very strange. Just like Du Xiaofu, he didn't team up with others. Why was he with Du Xiaofu now? However, Xiao Yingmeng didn't have time to think about it. She immediately looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "Du Xiaofu, quickly set up a glyph array. Someone is chasing us from behind. It's Jiao Ming, the human king on the bronze ranking. His strength isn't something we can contend against." Du Xiaofu's expression changed slightly when he heard that. There was 1 human king and 3 heroes in this group, yet they were still beaten so miserably. One could imagine how powerful the experts on the bronze rankings behind them were. Little rookies, a glyph array won't be able to trap us. We won't be able to escape. The chasing shouts grew closer and closer. In the distant sky in front of them, numerous figures were already rushing over with lightning-like speed, wrapped in long rays of light. Fuck! Du Xiaofu cursed inwardly. This trouble was definitely brought about by Qiao Yingmeng's group. Without any hesitation, Du Xiaofu formed a series of hand seals in his hand. Energy fluctuations immediately swept over from the surrounding air as a dazzling white light covered his body like a divine light. Swish, swish, in the sky in front of them, several long rays of light swept over. As their auras descended, sand and pebbles were sent flying in the stone forest below. The auras were astonishing, causing the originally pale faces of the youths behind Su Chuyin to turn grave at this moment. As those auras descended, Judge Hao's face turned grave. Those auras were much more tyrannical compared to the ordinary bronze list teams, especially the first 2 auras. As their auras collapsed, Judge Hao felt a pressure in his heart. Boom! In this short period of time, waves of natural energy rapidly fluctuated in the surrounding air. In Du Xiaofu's hands, 21 formation flags that emitted astonishing fluctuations were formed, causing the surrounding air to violently tremble. However, at this moment, the energy within Du Xiaofu's body was endlessly poured into the 21 formation flags, causing his resolute face to turn slightly pale. Without any delay, the 21 formation flags in his hands immediately swept towards the sky in front of him. Swish, swish. The 21 formation flags wrapped around the space in front of them with lightning speed and trajectory, mysteriously connecting with each other, after which they transformed into dazzling glyph-light pillars that soared into the sky. Be careful, there's a 6-star beginner symbol master among the rookies. Quickly retreat. The expressions of the figures that had just appeared in the sky immediately changed. Not long ago, they had broken a 6-star beginner symbol array and originally thought that the other party was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Never did they expect that there was still a 6-star beginner symbol master hiding. Immediately, they began to rapidly retreat. 5-direction mountain binding formation. A low shout rang out from Du Xiaofu's mouth. The formation flags transformed into light pillars that soared into the sky, immediately transforming into a formidable symbol array that enveloped the surrounding area. The 5-direction mountain binding formation. Back then, Du Xiaofu had used it in order to escape the pursuit of the few martial kings on the long river of the central region. However, when Du Xiaofu had used it back then, he had practically exhausted all of his energy. Currently, Du Xiaofu was at his peak. He was a genuine 6-star beginner symbol master. A 6-star beginner symbol array was a piece of cake for him. Rumble. As the symbol array enveloped the area, wind and clouds surged in the air, causing space to distort and become chaotic. Soon after, it trapped the few bronze-ranking experts whose expressions had changed. The 5-direction mountain binding formation was a symbol array that focused on suppressing and not attacking. Hence, it had a special defensive aspect that made it difficult to forcefully break through. Let's go! As the symbol array was laid out, Du Xiaofu's complexion was somewhat pale. He did not dare to stay for even a second longer. Profound energy immediately gushed out from his feet as his figure soared into the sky. Du Xiaofu had also sensed the auras of the few bronze-ranking experts. Especially the 2 at the front, their auras were extremely powerful. He could not allow himself to be used as a knife in this place. Following Du Xiaofu's departure, Hao Bian's reaction was not the slightest bit inferior to Du Xiaofu's. At practically the same time as Du Xiaofu, profound energy gushed out. His fat body was extremely fast and incomparably lithe. Let's go, let's go! Qiao Yingming tenderly shouted as she looked in the direction Du Xiaofu left. Her enchanting figure twisted as she quickly chased after him. Behind her, Su Chuyun's expression slightly changed. Without much hesitation, she immediately followed. Whoosh whoosh! Mo Win and several others also quickly followed. Only Mu Jiejia's delicate and beautiful face had some slight astonishment. Just now, she had personally seen how Du Xiaofu laid out a 6-star beginner level symbol array. It was simply as easy as stretching out his hand, as if it was instantly cast. It was even faster than a martial skill, cast by an ordinary cultivator. And she was also a 6-star beginner level symbol array master. Among the symbol array masters with the same cultivation, she was not considered weak. She had the talent of a hero. However, the 6-star beginner level symbol array that she condensed earlier required Su Qian, Qiao Yingmeng, Mo Win, and the others to buy time for her to successfully set it up. But Du Xiaofu's symbol array just now was as if it was cast in an instant. As a symbol array master, she naturally knew the difference between the 2. The difference was absolutely not small. After a short moment of astonishment, Mu Jiejia also immediately came back to her senses. Her beautiful figure flashed out and immediately followed. This 6-star beginner level symbol array is not ordinary. It's much stronger than the one that the woman set up before. Let's work together and forcefully break it. Bang, bang, bang. The symbol array in the air above the stone forest made muffled sounds like thunder. Wave after wave of energy attacks collided with the symbol array, causing it to shake. However, it was not destroyed in one hit. After a series of powerful attacks, the talisman formation that covered the sky above the stone forest shook and finally began to crack. A moment later, the symbol array completely exploded under the impact of the powerful energy, turning into broken symbol arrays that filled the sky and dissipated. Rumble! The astonishing energy swept out, causing a large area of huge rocks to crack and explode. Rocks shot out. In the end, under the impact of the violent energy, a large area of the stone forest was razed to the ground and disappeared. Chase! That's a bunch of heroes and human king rookies. We can't let Yin Machin and Si Ruofeng's teams snatch them away. Silhouettes soared into the sky from within the array. They quickly chased after Yi Shiwen. A vigorous aura fluctuated, and the silhouettes suddenly disappeared in midair. A large area of the stone forest was razed to the ground, and the energy wind slowly dissipated. Not far away, there was a continuous stretch of rocky mountains and valleys. The continuous winding valleys were like a grayish-white python crawling in the middle of the valleys. There were layers upon layers of mountains, and it was completely silent. Chapter 6, 25. After a long time, in a hidden cave within a crack in the canyon, there was a fishing net at the entrance. It emitted a faint radiance, then turned into runes and converged. Finally, it fell into Du Xiaofu's hand. The cave wasn't big, but there were 10 people inside. Especially Hao Guan's size, he was as big as 3 people. The 10 people's auras were tightly restrained. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Su Qian's gaze landed on the heaven's net that Du Xiaofu had just put away. Although he was rewarded with one in the Manchu, no one would complain about having too many heaven's net. Du Xiaofu's expression wasn't good. He had no choice but to use the heaven's net to protect everyone. Although he could hide his aura and escape from the bronze list experts, the others didn't have the ability to do so, especially the few peak martial lord youths. After refining the heaven's net for his own use, Du Xiaofu also knew that the heaven's net was extraordinary and had many uses. One of them was the ability to hide one's aura. The effect of concealing one's aura might seem to be of little value, but in reality it was of great use to cultivators, especially when they were escaping. It was simply an escape treasure. Figures walked out of the cave and entered the canyon. Du Xiaofu immediately left. He definitely didn't want to be with these people. Hao Bian naturally followed by Du Xiaofu's side. His fat body followed gracefully. "Hey, where are you going?" Seeing Du Xiaofu leave, Qiao Yingmeng immediately asked Du Xiaofu, "I saved you guys once. Just treat it as the news you gave me yesterday was too low. Now, you guys go your own way, and I'll go mine. Don't follow me anymore." Du Xiaofu waved his hand. If he stayed with these people, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. The sooner he left, the safer he would be. "Why are you like this? You don't have any feelings at all." Qiao Yingmeng didn't count. Her beautiful body immediately caught up to Du Xiaofu and blocked in front of Du Xiaofu. Her beautiful body even straightened up, making the curve of her chest protrude even more. "I'm not familiar with you guys. Where do you get the feelings from?" Du Xiaofu only asked Qiao Yingmeng, but his eyes involuntarily landed on the protruding curve in front of him. Upon closer inspection, there seemed to be 2 small protruding points on the perfectly round lump. They were faintly discernible and naturally alluring. "What are you looking at, pervert?" Qiao Yingmeng looked at Du Xiaofu and then looked at her chest. She immediately took 2 steps back. She crossed her hands in front of her chest and glared at Du Xiaofu. "I didn't expect you. You're so young. You're a pervert, shameless. You." "Qiao Yingmeng, I'm a pervert. What did I do? Did I touch you? Did I kiss you?" Du Xiaofu was stunned for a moment before he howled. This was definitely an insult to his clean reputation. He hadn't done anything at all, yet he was suddenly called a pervert. "You!" Qiao Yingmeng fiercely glared at Du Xiaofu. "I'm talking business with you. Join us. If we work together, we'll have the power to protect ourselves against the experts on the bronze ranking. I'll be able to protect myself if you don't bring trouble to me. I'm not interested in joining you guys." Du Xiaofu shook his head, avoided Qiao Yingmeng, and left. "What will it take for you to join us?" Qiao Yingmeng didn't give up and once again blocked in front of Du Xiaofu. However, this time she was on guard and didn't dare to block him. She subconsciously covered her chest to prevent that little pervert from taking advantage of her. Du Xiaofu stared at the girl in front of him and suddenly smiled evilly. "Why don't you give me a kiss? Kiss me, and I'll join you guys. How about it?" "Shameless! How can you take advantage of someone like that?" Judge Hao, who was beside him, couldn't bear to watch any longer as he inwardly muttered. Su Qian, who was standing not far away, saw Du Xiaofu's evil smile and his eyes staring at Qiao Yingmeng. Her eyes immediately turned gloomy. "You wish?" Qiao Yingmeng shouted at Du Xiaofu and almost spat her saliva on Du Xiaofu's face. "Forget it if you don't want to kiss me. Then we'll meet again. Don't block me." Du Xiaofu wasn't polite as he turned around and left. He wouldn't do anything that didn't benefit him. This was his principle. This time, Qiao Yingmeng didn't continue to block him. Her beautiful face was filled with anger as she angrily stomped her feet. "Why don't you give me a kiss and I'll join you guys?" Judge Hao's fat face moved closer to Qiao Yingmeng. His eyes narrowed into a straight line, and his thick lips slightly pouted. "Damn, Fatty, you're asking for a beating." Xiao Yingmeng was in the middle of it, and immediately kicked him without hesitation. "Ah!" Judge Hao let out a miserable shriek as he rubbed his butt. He immediately chased after Du Xiaofu as he muttered, "If you don't want to kiss me, then don't kiss me. Why did you kick me?" Xiao Yingming's beautiful eyes looked at Du Xiaofu's departing figure as she loudly shouted, "Du Xiaofu, leave. Do you think we can't do it without you? As for you, I accidentally heard that many people on the bronze rankings are looking for you, especially Si Ruofeng and Jiao Ming. Do you think you can hide from them? In the last 2 hours of the last day of the Giant Rock space, everyone will appear at the Giant Rock Plaza. At that time, you and that damn Fatty will be out of luck. At that time, how will the two of you be able to resist Si Ruofeng and the other experts on the bronze rankings? If you join us now, we will naturally help you when the time comes. If you don't join us, then forget it. At worst, we'll break up. I'll wait to see how unlucky you are at the Giant Rock Plaza." As Xiao Yingming's final words faded, Du Xiaofu's figure suddenly stopped. He looked at Judge Hao, who had caught up, and asked, "Fatty, is what that woman said true or false? I've never heard that the Giant Rock space would change every day. However, I've heard from the elder that when we leave on the 7th day, it seems like we will appear at the Giant Rock Plaza in the last 2 hours. Judge Hao nodded. He had indeed heard about this from the elder. "Is it true?" When Du Xiaofu heard this, his index finger scratched his chin as his gaze focused. If what Xiao Yingmeng said was true, then he would indeed be in trouble on the Giant Rock Plaza in the last 2 hours before he left on the 7th day. Moreover, it wouldn't be ordinary trouble. It was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. Du Xiaofu naturally understood this logic. Du Xiaofu was definitely not arrogant enough to think that he could contend against all the experts on the bronze rankings by himself. At the same time, Du Xiaofu also did not want to be trampled by all the people on the bronze rankings on the Giant Rock Plaza. "All right, since you are so sincere in inviting me to join, I will agree to join you." After secretly pondering for a while, Du Xiaofu immediately turned around. His originally ugly face was suddenly filled with a smile as he directly walked towards Xiao Yingming. His hand landed on Xiao Yingming's shoulder as he put his arm around her shoulder like an old friend. He said, "We are now a team. Why don't we properly discuss how to deal with those fellows on the bronze rankings?" Seeing that Du Xiaofu had actually directly placed his hand on Xiao Yingming's shoulder and that Xiao Yingming did not seem to reject him, this caused Su Qiyun's dark gaze to become even darker as a cold glint stealthily flashed across her eyes. This change in attitude is faster than flipping a book. Seeing Du Xiaofu's current warm attitude, Judge Hao was dazed for a moment before he helplessly shook his head. Xiao Yingmeng did not seem to have expected Du Xiaofu's sudden change in attitude. Her bright eyes glared at Du Xiaofu as she said, "Immediately release your claws, or I will not be polite to you. Don't be so fierce. A tomboy will never find a husband. You should be more gentle." Du Xiaofu chuckled. When he saw Xiao Yingming's tightly glared eyes, he immediately withdrew his hand. He did not want to be kicked like Judge Hao. "None of your business, little pervert." Xiao Yingmeng fiercely glared at Du Xiaofu. "All right, since we are now together, we should properly discuss how to deal with those experts on the bronze rankings." Mu Jiejie stepped forward. Her delicate and pretty face was filled with a charming smile. "That's right. Congratulations to the 2 of you for joining us." Su Chuyin stepped forward. His blue clothes were clear, and his gaze had once again become as gentle as a spring breeze. The corners of his thin lips were slightly raised. He looked noble and unrestrained with a smile on his face. Although he was arrogant, he gave off an extremely amiable aura. At this moment, Su Chuyun's heart was extremely complicated. Looking at Xiao Yingmeng and Du Xiaofu, his heart could not help but turn gloomy. Xiao Yingmeng was the target of his pursuit, although he had yet to succeed. However, in Su Chuyun's heart, Qiao Yingmeng was already his exclusive property and no one could touch her. But just now, that Du Xiaofu was flirting with his exclusive property and even had his arms around her shoulders. Even he had never done such an action before, especially when Su Chuyun clearly saw that Qiao Yingmeng did not reject Du Xiaofu's helplessness. This made him feel extremely displeased in his heart.